Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. It started with a scream no one else heard. The forest behind Grange Hollow had always been the stuff of children's nightmares and old men's drunk tales, but what the Wexley family uncovered that cold October evening was something far worse than superstition. It was ancient, watching, and unspeakably hungry. Before the police reports, before the disappearances, before the desperate voicemail that would later haunt national news, there was only the wind that whispered names and the house, silent, rotten, and somehow still breathing. 37-year-old Ethan Wexley wasn't the kind of man who feared shadows. A former firefighter turned insurance adjuster, he'd seen charred bodies, freak accidents, and the aftermath of crimes that made him lose sleep. But fear, real fear, that wasn't something he believed in anymore. Until he stepped foot inside the Blackthorn house. They hadn't even intended to go there. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway. Just him, his wife Alyssa, and their twin sons, Caleb and Jonah. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with no screens, no deadlines, no drama. They rented an old Victorian farmhouse they found listed on a strange local website. The kind that seemed hastily put together, half-broken links, blurry photos, no reviews. But it was cheap, and the listing said secluded, private, perfect for family reconnection. And the photos, while grainy, showed wide-open meadows, towering trees, and a wraparound porch that seemed made for chilly mornings and warm coffee. They booked it. But the moment they turned down the long dirt road leading to the property, everything felt off. Not wrong, exactly. Just watchful. The trees leaned in too close, bending in unnatural ways despite the still air. A heavy fog pooled low across the path like something crawling along the ground. There was no reception, not even a weak bar. Alyssa joked that it was real rustic, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. The boys, who had been arguing in the back seat over a tablet, suddenly went silent. No reason, just quiet. Ethan glanced at them in the rearview mirror. Caleb was staring out the window, Jonah chewing on his thumbnail. His eyes narrowed like he was trying to see through the mist. The house appeared out of nowhere. One moment, just trees. The next, its silhouette was there. Huge black, like it had grown from the earth itself. At first glance, it looked abandoned. The porch sagged under the weight of time, shutters hung crookedly, and every window was covered with thick curtains from the inside. Yet, the key was under the flower pot like the owner had said. Inside, the place was clean. Too clean, like it had been scrubbed and scrubbed for years, but not lived in. No personal items, no dust, but no life either. Just immaculate, sterile rooms furnished like a home that was pretending to be one. They tried to laugh it off, unpacked, made dinner. The oven didn't work. The fridge was already cold. The beds were made, too perfectly. Caleb said he didn't like his room, claimed it smelled like crying. Jonah said nothing, just sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the antique mirror above the dresser. That first night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Not from fear. Not yet. It was the noise, or the lack of it. No wind, no owls, no creaking beams or whispering leaves. Just the deep, unnatural stillness of something waiting. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the sound came. A long, dragging whisper across the hall. Not footsteps. Not quite. Like something brushing across wood, as if someone was crawling. He stood, grabbed the flashlight from his bag, and stepped into the hallway. Darkness swallowed the beam more than it should have. The house was wrong. The layout didn't match the one from the online listing. There were more doors. A narrow staircase that coiled downward where the listing said there was no basement. He should have gone back to bed, but curiosity, stupid human curiosity, pushed him. The door at the end of the hall was open. Not wide, just a sliver. Enough to see a pale light glowing from within. He pushed it open slowly. Empty room. No furniture. Just a rocking chair, rocking by itself. He closed the door. In the morning, things were worse. The twins had nosebleeds, both of them. No cause, no injuries. Alyssa was quiet, distracted. She stood in the kitchen, staring into the sink for nearly 15 minutes before Ethan touched her shoulder, and she jumped like she'd been burned. "We need to leave," she whispered. Not said whispered, like she was afraid something might hear. Ethan agreed. They packed up, grabbed bags, called the owner, no answer, called the booking site, number disconnected. And then Caleb vanished. 1 second he was in the living room, playing with a wooden toy they found in the upstairs closet. A toy no one brought, carved in the shape of a stag with antlers too sharp. The next second, gone. No door opened, no sound, just silence. They tore through the house. Every room, every corner. Opened closets, checked under beds. Called his name until their voices cracked. Jonah stood in the hallway, holding the toy. He went into the mirror, he said simply, like it was a fact. She took him. Ethan didn't believe it. Couldn't. Mirrors don't take children. But then they checked the mirror in Jonah's room, and it was no longer a mirror. It was dark, not just black, depthless, like a hole pretending to be a reflection. They saw movement, a flicker of color, maybe a hand. Alyssa screamed. Ethan tried to break it with a chair. The chair shattered, but the mirror didn't even crack. Then the whispering started. At first, faint, indecipherable, but growing. Low voices, multiple, overlapping, coming from every direction. Walls. Vents. Under the floorboards. And they were saying the same thing over and over. Let him stay. Let him stay. Let him stay. Jonah began bleeding from his ears. Alyssa fainted. Ethan dragged them both outside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the voices stopped. Instantly, the air cleared, birds chirped, the sun even seemed a little warmer. But Caleb didn't come out. Ethan went back in, alone. And that's when the door shut behind him. It didn't slam, didn't creak, just clicked. He turned to open it. There was no door, just wall. The layout had changed again. The staircase was gone. The windows were boarded up now. The hallway stretched longer than before, and it wasn't empty. A figure stood at the far end, too tall, neck crooked, arms too long, dangling like wet vines. No face, just a void where a face should be, wearing what looked like a wedding dress, but aged and soaked through with something dark. She didn't move. Ethan froze. Every hair on his body screamed. He wanted to run, scream, do anything but stand there. And then she began walking. Not stumbling, not crawling, walking. Deliberate. Each footstep echoing like a hammer. He turned and ran, found a staircase, descended. The house changed with each step. Wallpaper peeled back. Mold grew in fast, forward. Paint bubbled and split. Something dripped from the ceiling. The air was thick, like breathing water. At the bottom, a hallway of mirrors. Dozens of them, lining both sides. Tall, thin, cracked in impossible patterns. And in each one, reflections. Not of him, of Caleb. Each mirror showed him in a different pose. Crying, laughing, screaming, bleeding, drowning, rotted. And behind him in every reflection, her, the woman. Sometimes smiling, sometimes weeping. Sometimes with her mouth unhinged like a snake's, swallowing the boy whole. Then one mirror flickered, changed. It showed Ethan, standing in the hallway, and behind him, he turned. She was there, so close. He felt her breath. Cold, rotten, old. She raised her hand. It held Caleb's toy stag. Only now, it wasn't wood, it was bone. And then, blackness. When he woke up, it was morning. Outside, alone, no house, just trees, fog. The house was gone, the car was gone, his family gone. But in his pocket, the toy, and it was warm and breathing. Ethan never made it out of the woods. He was found 6 days later, naked, covered in bruises and scratches, muttering a name that no one recognized. His wife and children were never found. No trace, no records. Not even the website they booked through. But in every missing person's photo of the Wexley family, when you zoom in just right, in the background of the living room shot, you can see her. Just standing there, smiling, waiting. And in the next part, we go back in time to the original owners of the Blackthorn house, to a woman buried alive, to a child that never cried, and to the first time the mirror whispered back. Before there were whispers in the hallways or shadows in the mirrors, there was blood in the floorboards. The Blackthorn house didn't earn its name because of the thicket of tangled brambles that surrounded it, though those were there too, wild and aggressive, black as pitch and sharp enough to slice through denim. No, it got its name from Eleanor Blackthorn, the first wife, the first ghost, and, some say, the first victim. In 1872, before electricity, before paved roads reached that far into the woods, the Blackthorn estate was known as a place of wealth, if not warmth. Built by Elias Blackthorn, a widowed industrialist with a fondness for control and an allergy to affection, the home stood 3 stories tall, with a 4th level hidden beneath, the basement, which was never included in blueprints, never spoken of in polite company, and never entered by the servants unless ordered. Elias had money, yes. He had power, certainly. But what he didn't have was peace. Eleanor was his second wife, a soft-spoken girl of 19 when he married her, barely out of finishing school. They said she was beautiful, with coppery hair, a face so pale it seemed translucent, and wide, sunken eyes that never quite looked straight at you. Elias had found her at a sanitarium, recovering from what her doctors called hysteria. She had suffered visions, terrible ones, that she would later write about in a secret journal no one was supposed to find. Visions of mirrors that reflected the wrong world, of hands reaching through glass, of voices calling her name, before she ever told anyone what it was. Elias brought her home, not out of love, but because the visions intrigued him. He believed them. He believed she was gifted, touched by something beyond this world, and so he built the mirror room. It was hidden beneath the house, down a spiral stone staircase that stayed cold even in summer. There were 13 mirrors, one for each veil between the worlds, as Elias called them. Each one imported from a different part of the globe. India, Egypt, China, France, Norway, some hundreds of years old, some stolen from temples, some carved from obsidian, others framed in bones no one could identify. He made Eleanor sit in that room every night, made her stare, for hours, until the candles burned out and her eyes bled tears. At first the servants said she resisted, screamed, refused to go down, but Elias was patient, methodical. He would lock her in her bedroom without food. He would whisper to her through the keyhole, tell her that if she didn't open herself to the other side, he'd send her back to the asylum. That he'd say she tried to drown herself. Or worse, tried to drown their child. Because Eleanor had given birth just 6 months after the wedding, a daughter whom Elias named Clara. No one ever saw the child, not once. The nursemaid who attended the birth vanished 3 days later. Elias said she'd fled with a lover. The midwife who cut the cord went mute, her tongue later found in a jar under her bed. People began to whisper. About the baby, about the mirrors, about Eleanor's screams at night. Then, one morning, Eleanor stopped screaming, not because she'd found peace, but because she'd found something else. The diary, what little remained of it, spoke of a mirror that no longer showed her reflection, one framed in brass, smudged and cracked near the center. She called it the bleeding glass. She claimed that it shimmered at night, like water, and sometimes she could see something on the other side. Not her, not a version of her, but something waiting. A woman with her eyes, but not her body. Taller, thinner, mouth too wide, smiling too long. And this other woman whispered to her, said her name like a song, said she could take the pain away. All she had to do was step through. All she had to do was give her what she wanted. Clara. On the night Eleanor vanished, there was no storm. No thunder to mask the creaking floorboards. The servants said they saw her walk calmly into the parlor, that she kissed the portrait of Elias above the fireplace, that she whispered something no one could hear. and then she went down into the basement, barefoot, white nightgown trailing behind her like a veil. No one ever saw her again. Elias claimed she ran off. But the blood that seeped through the floorboards said otherwise. What he didn't know was that Eleanor had left something behind. Not just her diary, but something far more dangerous. The mirror, it had changed. The morning after she disappeared, the servants found the bleeding glass had cracked down the center, a single red line, like a wound. None of them would touch it. One boy tried to cover it with a sheet, but his hand blistered on contact. That afternoon, he drowned in the pond behind the stables. Witnesses claimed they saw him step into the water like he was sleepwalking, eyes wide open, mouth moving like he was answering someone only he could hear. The house began to shift. Rooms changed shape. Doors appeared where none had been. Cold spots spread like infection. The baby, Clara, cried day and night. When they found her crib overturned and the child missing, Elias finally locked the basement, boarded it up with nails made of silver, crosses etched into every beam. He had priests come. 3 of them. Only one left the house, and he was never sane again. Elias lived another 8 years. He died screaming. Found at the foot of the basement stairs, neck snapped, eyes gouged out, a smile carved into his cheeks. The house passed through many hands after that. Some tried to renovate it, burn it, sell it. But it never stayed sold for long. Strange things happened. Workers went missing. Families left in the middle of the night. Sometimes, the house simply rejected them. They'd show up, suitcases in hand, and find it locked, windowless, as if it had never been lived in. Others weren't so lucky, and still the mirror remained, never removed, never broken, only waiting. In 1936, a family of 6 moved in, the Darnells. They were warned. The locals told them to stay away from the basement, to ignore the voices, to never, ever uncover the mirrors. They lasted 11 days. The mother was found wandering the nearby woods, naked, singing lullabies in a language no one recognized. The father hung himself from the 3rd-floor landing with a note that read, "She's in the glass. She has the baby. Don't let her out." The children were never found, and so the house slept again. Decades passed, but the story never died. It flickered through urban legend, whispered through back alleys and summer campfire tales. The woman in white, the mirror that shows your death, the child in the walls. Most called it fiction, until the Wexleys. Until the toy was found, still warm. Until the police uncovered the fragments of Eleanor's diary, hidden in a false panel behind the fireplace. Pages missing, ink faded, but one line still legible: "Each mirror is a mouth, and she is always hungry." The past isn't dead in Blackthorn House. It's not even past. And in the next part, we'll meet someone who tried to destroy the mirror. A priest who believed he could outwit the thing inside it. A man who left behind a trail of salt, ash, and something far darker than holy water. Because what lives behind the glass isn't a ghost. It's older, it's watching, and it remembers everyone who's looked too long. There's a reason churches never stayed open in Grange Hollow. It wasn't the people, they tried. Built 6 of them over the last 100 years. Each blessed, each torn down or mysteriously burned within a decade. The town didn't even seem cursed, not at first glance. Families lived there for generations. The trees were tall, the land fertile, and yet, no congregation could ever thrive, because something older than prayer watched from the shadows, and the one man who dared to challenge it came close to stopping it, but vanished before he could tell anyone how. Father Thomas Ashbridge was not a man of fiction. He believed in sin and salvation, heaven and hell, nothing in between. No talk of ghosts, no superstition. For most of his life, he'd served churches in small, forgotten towns like Grange Hollow, where sin came in the form of moonshine, adultery, and the occasional fistfight during Sunday potlucks. When he was assigned to the Church of St. Aloysius in 1951, he thought it would be another quiet chapter in his predictable life. He was wrong. The church was modest, white brick and stained glass windows, nestled at the edge of the woods. But from the day he arrived, the land felt sick. The grass behind the altar never grew. The air inside the chapel remained bitterly cold, even in midsummer. And on the first Sunday sermon, when he poured the communion wine, it turned black. Still, he persisted. Thomas believed in reason, in faith. But the people of Grange Hollow were afraid, and they didn't hide it. They wouldn't speak of the house, wouldn't go near the forest after sundown. Some wouldn't even look him in the eyes when he mentioned Eleanor Blackthorne, the town historian, a toothless woman named Marla who wore 7 crucifixes and smoked like a chimney, was the only one who told him the truth. They say she still walks the mirrors, she whispered, ash falling from her cigarette like snow. They say she feeds through them, on children, on memories, on whatever makes you human. Thomas, of course, didn't believe her. Not until he found the boy. It was a Tuesday morning when he heard the weeping. Faint, distant, coming from the woods behind the rectory. He followed it, expecting some wounded animal or child lost during play. What he found was worse. The boy couldn't have been more than 8. Filthy, bones showing through torn clothes. His fingers raw like he'd clawed his way out of the ground. He was curled at the base of an oak tree, whispering something over and over, she's still hungry. She's still hungry. Thomas carried him back to the church, cleaned his wounds, and called the sheriff. But by the time help arrived, the boy was gone. No footprints, no broken window. Just a single word, scratched into the floorboards with a nail mirror. That night, Thomas didn't sleep. Did you fall asleep, dear listener? If not, kindly subscribe to the channel if you are loving this story. Now back to the story. That night Thomas didn't sleep. Instead, he read, dug through town records, found stories that made his skin crawl. Disappearances, strange dreams, people burning their own homes to escape whispers. Then he found the police report from 1872, the original one written by the constable who investigated Eleanor Blackthorne's disappearance. The report had been redacted, but a note at the bottom remained. The child's crib was empty, but the mirror above it was warm to the touch. That was the first time Thomas considered that mirrors, those simple panes of glass, might not just reflect, but receive, hold, devour. So he returned to the woods, found the Blackthorne property, now overgrown and nearly invisible. The house still stood, sagging, silent, every window covered. But as he stepped onto the porch, the air changed. Time didn't stop, it twisted. The trees leaned back, the insects fell quiet, and he heard it. A voice, soft, childlike, echoing from within the boards of the house. Father, will you pray for me? He opened the door, and the house exhaled. Inside, it was exactly as the legend said. Rotten wood, frozen air, no lights, yet a dull glow came from nowhere. The walls were wet, breathing, almost, and at the end of the long hallway stood a mirror taller than any man. One that hadn't been touched by time. It didn't reflect him. Instead, it showed a little girl, pale, red-haired, eyes too wide. She tilted her head, smiled, and whispered, Clara. Thomas recoiled, nearly ran, but he remembered his calling. He pulled a flask of holy water from his coat, began to pray. Latin first, then English. He cast the sign of the cross, threw the water toward the glass. It sizzled. Smoke poured from the mirror. The girl vanished. The walls screamed. Yes! Screamed. Not creaked, not groaned, screamed. It was a sound no human throat could make, layered and deep, like dozens of voices melting into one. Thomas fell to his knees, ears bleeding. The floor beneath him opened, just a crack, but enough to see movement below. Faces. Hundreds of them, trapped behind glass. Some children, some adults, all mouths open in silent agony, eyes begging for release. He crawled out of the house. The mirror didn't follow. Not then. But it left its mark. Thomas spent the next 2 years researching, fasting, even seeking exorcists from outside the country. He came back to the house twice more, each time more prepared. He used lines of salt, ancient rites, relics stolen from cathedrals. On his final visit, he brought a hammer blessed in Jerusalem and tried to shatter the main mirror. He struck it once. The mirror did not crack, but the hammer did. It split like glass. The reflection changed. It showed him, not as he was, but older, broken, mouth sewn shut. Kneeling before the girl in white as she ran her hands through his hair like a pet, he dropped the hammer, ran, and never spoke again. Literally, something stole his voice. Doctors couldn't explain it. His vocal cords were intact, no trauma, no injury. But his mouth, his throat, refused to make sound. Some said he had seen something so terrible it shattered his will. Others claimed the mirror took payment for letting him live. He moved away, into the hills, became a hermit, and for the rest of his life, he would only write one word on every surface he could find. Scratched into stone, written on walls, painted in ash across his cabin floor, "She's not a ghost." When he died in 1965, they found his body with a mirror placed over his face. The glass was clean, but when they lifted it, his eyes were gone, scooped out, hollow, no blood, just a single fingerprint smudged across the glass, small, delicate, like a child's. To this day, no one knows what Father Ashbridge saw on his final visit. No one found the relics he took into that house. And the mirror, it remains, unbroken, waiting. And in the next part, we'll uncover the journal of a woman who lived in the house after the priest, the only survivor of the 1973 disappearances. A teenager whose pages scream of doors that weren't there the night before. And the moment her reflection started blinking when she didn't. They say when your reflection doesn't copy you, it's not a mirror anymore, it's a doorway. In the summer of 1973, just before the storms that flooded most of Grange Hollow, a family of 4 moved into the Blackthorn house. The Dunns, no relation to anyone local. Just a father, a mother, and 2 daughters trying to escape the noise of Detroit. Back then, the house was listed for next to nothing. Most locals wouldn't go near it. They said the foundation was cracked, that it was infested with mold, snakes, ghosts, anything to keep people out. But George Dunn was stubborn. He called it superstition, said the bones of a house didn't care what stories people told. He planned to renovate it himself. But the house didn't need renovation, it needed blood. The only survivor was 16-year-old Anna Dunn, and what she wrote in her journal, scrawled in uneven letters on pages ripped from her textbooks and stuffed into the lining of her mattress, was locked away for decades. Only after she died in a psychiatric hospital in 2004 did her journal come to light, and even then, many refused to believe it. Said she was hallucinating. That trauma had bent her mind. But the things she described matched what had been whispered for over a century. It started small. Anna wrote that the house didn't smell right. Not old, she scribbled, not musty. Just wrong. Like something burned a long time ago and never finished smoldering. Her little sister, Rachel, only 7 at the time, kept getting nosebleeds. Their mother grew distant, walking the halls at night barefoot, whispering to someone who wasn't there. Their father, a proud man, began locking doors that didn't need locks, especially the basement. He claimed it was unsafe, that the floor was rotted. But Anna noticed the key was always with him, hung around his neck like a crucifix. The second week, things shifted. Rachel began to talk to the mirrors. At first, Anna thought she was playing, just a child with an imaginary friend. But it wasn't just the bedroom mirror. It was every mirror. The one in the bathroom. The one in their mother's compact. Even the reflection on the window when the lights were on inside. Rachel would stop and stare, her lips moving, nodding, listening. When Anna asked what she was doing, Rachel would reply with that strange calmness only the disturbed seem to find. She tells me stories. The next night, Anna caught Rachel drawing on the mirror with lipstick, circles, symbols, a childlike stick figure with too many limbs and no eyes. Anna scolded her, washed it clean. But when she woke up the next morning, the symbols were back, only now, drawn in something red and sticky. And Rachel was asleep, sitting upright on the floor, her face turned toward the mirror, her eyes open but rolled back. That day, Anna began writing in secret. Her entries were frantic, growing messier, more erratic. She wrote about cold spots that followed her, whispers in the pipes. She said the mirrors started flickering, not like lights, but like something was breathing on the other side. She covered them with blankets, sheets, towels, but every morning they were bare again. Worse, her reflection was late, not wrong, just delayed, blinking a second too slow, smiling when she wasn't, turning its head just a fraction of a second after she did, like it was watching her, learning. On the 12th day, her mother vanished. She'd gone down to the basement after hearing Rachel's cries. The door slammed behind her. When Anna and her father managed to pry it open, it was empty. The air was thick, fall, like a swamp in summer. But there were no footsteps, no broken furniture, just a single shoe, her mother's, still warm. George changed after that. He stopped speaking, just sat on the couch and stared at the wall, the key to the basement still hanging around his neck. Sometimes, Anna found him in the middle of the night, whispering to the mirror above the fireplace. His eyes didn't blink. His mouth barely moved. Just a constant hiss of breath, like he was reciting something too old to remember. Rachel, meanwhile, had stopped sleeping. She would stand in the hallway for hours, staring at the mirror that hung crooked at the top of the stairs. Anna tried to drag her away once. Rachel scratched her across the cheek so hard it drew blood. But she never looked at Anna. Not once. "Not you," she whispered. "You're not the one she wants." Anna ran, not out of the house. No, something about it wouldn't let her leave. The few times she tried, the doors wouldn't open. Not locked. Just not real anymore. She'd put her hand to the knob, and it would pass through like mist. Or worse, she'd open the door to find another hallway, another mirror, a loop that led her back to where she started. She turned to the phone. Dead. The radio, static. She tried writing a letter and throwing it from the second-story window. It never landed. She watched it fall and fall and fall, never hitting the ground. By the 15th day, George was gone too. Anna found the basement door wide open, the smell of iron and wet earth pouring from below. She didn't go down. She couldn't. Something told her, deep in her spine, that going down meant never coming back. Rachel stopped speaking altogether. But she wasn't quiet. She sang. Low, tuneless lullabies in a voice that wasn't hers, the kind of voice that came from too far away. And always, in front of a mirror. Sometimes she would tilt her head and laugh, like someone was whispering secrets too awful to keep. Anna wrote that she started sleeping during the day, too afraid of the mirrors at night. The reflections began to change. First, little things. Her clothes weren't quite right. Her hair was shorter. A scratch on her neck appeared in the mirror before it appeared on her skin. Then the reflection began smiling when she wasn't, looking at things behind her that weren't there. Then it spoke. Not aloud, but from the glass. Her own mouth moved, lips forming words she didn't say. Anna wrote that it said only one thing: "Let me out." And then it began mimicking her, standing in her room, moving behind her when she blinked. One night, she looked into the bathroom mirror and saw herself asleep on the floor behind her. She turned. The room was empty. But when she looked back, the other Anna smiled. "Almost time," she said. Anna stopped writing for 3 days. When the entries resumed, they were smeared with blood, shaky, almost unreadable. She claimed Rachel had vanished during the night, that the mirrors now showed only her. Dozens of her, hundreds, all slightly off, all watching. Then came the final entry. It was short, just 5 words. "I blinked first. She's free." When the police eventually arrived, called in by a relative who hadn't heard from the Dunns in weeks, they found the house silent. No sign of George, Rachel, or Mrs. Dunn. Anna was in the master bedroom, sitting in front of a mirror, staring at it, smiling. She didn't speak, not once. But she watched her reflection blink, perfectly in time. And in the next part, we'll return to the present, to a boy who found the mirror buried in an antique shop 3 states away. A mirror that should have been destroyed. A mirror that now follows him in every reflective surface and shows him a future where no one blinks at all. No one noticed the mirror go missing from the Blackthorn house. Not the demolition crew that gutted what was left of it after a fire in the late 90s. Not the real estate developers who bulldozed the foundation and sold the land off in squares, despite the fact that nothing would ever grow there. The house was ash, the legacy forgotten. But the mirror, it had already left. It was never destroyed, because it couldn't be. And 21 years later it found someone new. Jeremy Lang was 17 when he first saw it. A bored, restless senior in a town too small to keep his attention, with dreams of college and cities where things actually happened. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in math, computers, and getting as far away from his parents as he could without landing in debt. On weekends, he roamed the outskirts of town, old shops, flea markets, anything weird enough to pass the time. The antique store wasn't listed anywhere, just a peeling sign off a dirt road that read yesterday's home. No hours, no open sign. But the door was unlocked. Jeremy stepped in, hoping for something interesting. A strange book, maybe a vintage camera. What he found was dust, silence, and rows of forgotten things. Oil lamps, porcelain dolls with cracked faces, clocks that had stopped ticking decades ago. No owner in sight. No sound but the creak of the floor beneath his sneakers. And then he saw it, tucked behind a stack of mildewed chairs and rusted picture frames, a mirror. Oval, brass-framed, about 5 feet tall. But that wasn't what caught him. It was the reflection. It showed the store, but not quite. Things were shifted. Not wrong, just out of place. A doll in the mirror had its head turned the other way. A clock that was broken ticked in the glass. A red coat hanging near the back was blue in the reflection. Jeremy stared, unsure if it was a trick of the light or something else. Then he leaned closer and blinked. The reflection didn't. He laughed, told himself it was a delay in his own mind. Just a slow reaction, maybe tired eyes. But the air around the mirror felt off. Cool, metallic, like breathing inside a fridge. Still, it was beautiful. And the tag hanging from the frame read, 15. He couldn't resist. He carried it home strapped to the roof of his dad's car. The moment he brought it inside, things changed. Small at first. His cat, normally cuddly, hissed and ran under the couch the second the mirror entered the house. His phone glitched that night, the camera flipping on by itself, always facing toward the mirror. The light in his room buzzed until he unplugged it. But the real change came the next morning, when he noticed the bruise on his neck. He hadn't fallen, hadn't bumped anything. But there it was, right on the side, like a grip. 5 fingers, pressed hard enough to darken skin. He shrugged it off, told no one. But as the week went on, more bruises appeared. On his arms, his back, his ankle. He set up his laptop to record himself sleeping, half as a joke, half because a whisper kept waking him at 3:11 a.m. every night. What he found on the footage broke him. At first it was nothing, just him asleep. Then, around 3:12, the blanket moved. Not pulled, not kicked off, lifted. By invisible hands. Jeremy froze as he watched. The blanket peeled back like someone was studying him. A minute later, his arm lifted, by itself, and reached toward the mirror. His eyes stayed shut, mouth slack, but his body moved with precision. Then his head turned, slowly, toward the mirror, still asleep, still facing away. And in the mirror's reflection, he wasn't sleeping at all. He was staring straight into the glass, smiling. He deleted the video, told himself it was a glitch, sleepwalking. Maybe some dream caught on camera. But the bruises got worse, the whispers louder. And then, one night, he woke up on the floor, Not in his room. In the hallway, facing the mirror. His mouth hurt, like something had been stuffed inside it. When he checked in the mirror, he saw it. Black thread across his lips. Not on his body. In the reflection, like someone had sewn him shut. The image blinked. He didn't. Jeremy screamed. His parents didn't hear him. They said they never heard anything, that they hadn't seen him leave his room. But they noticed the change. He barely ate, jumped at his own reflection, avoided glass, metal, water, anything that showed him himself. And then he saw it in other places. Store windows, puddles, the microwave door, that second version of him, blinking wrong, smiling too wide, always watching. He tried to get rid of it, threw it in the garage, covered it with sheets, broke the glass with a crowbar. The mirror cracked. But it didn't break. The cracks healed overnight. The reflection, however, was no longer him. It was someone else. A woman, pale eyes like fog, and she spoke to him. No sound, just her lips moving over and over. Let me in. He moved out that weekend, left the mirror behind, but it followed him, no matter where he went. It wasn't the original mirror anymore. It didn't need to be. Now, every reflection showed a piece of her. At first, a flicker, a blink out of sync, then full glimpses. Standing behind him in a bathroom stall, sitting next to him on the bus window, her hand pressed against the surface, like she was inside the glass. One night, he woke up gasping, his lungs full of water. He hadn't drowned. But the sheets were soaked, his mouth dripping, and in the mirror the reflection of the bed was empty. Jeremy doesn't sleep now. He covers every surface, lives in a dark apartment with blackout curtains and no glass. But he knows she's still there, because sometimes just before he closes his eyes, he hears her voice echoing from the television screen. Low, mocking, "You're next." And in the next part, we'll hear from a man who claims he built the original Blackthorn mirrors, a craftsman who swore he didn't carve reflections, but prisons. And the deal he made with something that never blinks. He was never supposed to talk. That was part of the deal, sealed in a whisper, inkless and bloodless, the kind that isn't written but etched into bone. His name was Silas Grinlow, and in 1839 he carved mirrors for the wealthy, ornate, elegant. Haunting, his work was famed across 3 states. They said he could trap light, shape wood like it was silk, and polish glass so fine it showed not your face, but your soul. People paid fortunes, but none of them knew what they were really buying. Only one man ever asked what the mirrors were made of, and it was Elias Blackthorn, the same Elias who would later chain his wife in the basement of a cursed house. The same Elias whose daughter never cried. Elias had found Silas in a back alley workshop behind a butcher's stall in Boston, where the windows were always blacked out and the smell of iron never left. Elias didn't want beauty. He didn't want artistry. He wanted power. Something that could show more than the world. Something that could reach. And Silas delivered. He called them glass mouths, not mirrors, because they didn't just reflect. They opened. Each one was carved not from sanded glass or silver, but from something Silas never named. Something pulled from a cave beneath a mountain in Hungary, where locals refused to mine and the snow never melted. The glass was black at first, darker than obsidian, cold even under fire. But when Silas began to work it, grinding, shaping, whispering as he sanded, it began to change. It shimmered, shifted, and eventually it blinked. That was the price. He didn't use chisels or machines. His tools were bone. His polish wasn't paste. It was ash, human ash, mixed with oil, blood, and something that burned blue under moonlight. Silas never told anyone where he got the ash, but they said he only worked at night. That sometimes screams could be heard beneath the door of his shop, screams that didn't echo right, screams that looped. Elias ordered 13 mirrors. 1 for each gateway, he said. Silas didn't ask what they were for. He didn't need to, because he already knew. The first mirror showed him the mistake. He finished it at midnight, a tall, cathedral-shaped slab with veins in the glass that pulsed. As he polished the last corner, his candle blew out, not from wind, but from the mirror itself. The flame twisted, then vanished, and the glass moved. It didn't reflect the room. It showed a woman, pale, eyeless, weeping blood, her hands pressed against the inside, smearing red in spirals. Then she smiled, and in that moment, Silas tried to destroy it. But the mirror screamed, not like glass breaking, like something alive being torn apart. The scream pushed him back, shattered every bottle in the room, and cracked the walls of the workshop. He burned his hands trying to lift it. The mirror stayed untouched. The next morning, it was gone. Taken. Elias never asked how it was made. He paid in gold and silence. Silas continued, each mirror darker than the last. He swore they whispered to him while he slept, called him by name, promised things. A cure for the sickness that racked his bones. Visions of a daughter he lost to fever. Faces of those he buried. They said they could bring them back. All he had to do was finish. He kept going. Until the 12th mirror. That one changed everything, because it didn't reflect anything at all, not even him. He polished and polished, but it stayed empty. Like a void stretched thin, he stared too long. Hours passed, then days. The hunger inside it called to him. And one night, as he reached to cover it, his reflection finally appeared. Only it wasn't copying him. It leaned forward, grinned, and whispered, "You're late." He smashed the workshop the next morning, boarded the doors, tried to flee the city. But wherever he went, mirrors followed. Not the ones he'd made, new ones, windows, spoons, shiny doorknobs, puddles. All of them with that same delay. That same shadow just behind the reflection, like it was catching up. He started carving symbols. Not beautiful ones this time. Warding marks, protection lines, circles within circles. His skin was covered in them by the end, tattooed with soot and vinegar, burned with irons. But it didn't help, because the 13th mirror wasn't made by him, it made itself. Elias had vanished by then. Some said he'd gone to Europe. Others whispered he was eaten by his own house. But Silas knew. He felt it. The mirror had finished what he couldn't. It had been watching, learning, crafting itself from the glass left behind. And it wanted out, so he hid. Deep in the mountains, no glass, no reflections, only fire and salt. But even that wasn't enough, because when the townspeople found him, 20 years later, his cabin was in ruins. Scorch marks along the walls, salt circles broken, and Silas, he was standing in front of a cracked shard of mirror, no bigger than a plate, buried in the ashes. Dead, smiling, eyes wide open, and in the reflection, he wasn't alone. To this day, some say his mirrors are still out there, scattered, sold, hung in guest rooms and antique stores. Most do nothing, just glass. But a few still blink. And in the next part, we'll return to a girl who's seen the other side, not in dreams, not in stories, but in the flesh. Because she's the only one to ever go through the mirror and come back. And what followed her out still hasn't stopped knocking. She was gone for 8 minutes. That's what the official report says. 8 minutes. That's it. But her mother insists it was longer. That she watched the clock, really watched it, while her daughter vanished in front of her. One moment, 7-year-old Miriam Wells was brushing her hair in the hallway mirror, standing on tiptoe with a plastic pink brush and humming under her breath. The next, she was gone. Not walked away, not ran. Gone, like a puff of breath on a cold window, wiped clean. Her mother dropped the laundry, sprinted into the hallway screaming her name. No sound, no footsteps, no breeze. The mirror was intact, smooth, solid, cold, and Miriam was nowhere. Then 8 minutes later, she came back. Just reappeared, standing exactly where she'd been. Holding the brush. Same clothes. No bruises, no cuts, no dirt. But she wasn't humming anymore. And she wasn't blinking. The first thing her mother noticed was the silence. That terrifying, brittle quiet that felt like the moments before glass breaks. She asked where Miriam had gone, what happened. Miriam looked at her, slowly, as if measuring her with her eyes. Then she said one sentence, flat, emotionless, clear. I walked through the sky and into her mouth. They took her to the hospital. Blood work, scans. A dozen doctors poking at her. Nothing physically wrong. Heart rate fine. No trauma. But her EEG showed spikes. Tiny flares in her brain that suggested she'd experienced something intense. Something incomprehensible. They labeled it a fugue state. Gave her coloring books. Soft food. Told the parents not to panic. But her father did panic. Because when they brought Miriam home, their dog growled at her. Snarled. Ears pinned back. He'd raised that dog since it was a pup. It had never bitten anyone. But the second it saw Miriam, it lunged. Straight for her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She just stared at the dog as it attacked, and somehow it stopped mid-air. Froze. Dropped to the floor. Dead. Vet said it was a heart attack. But that wasn't what her father saw. He saw the way her eyes didn't move. Saw how the mirror beside the hallway seemed to ripple just after the dog collapsed. Like it was sighing. After that, things spiraled fast. Miriam didn't sleep. She didn't eat unless told to. She no longer played with toys, didn't speak unless spoken to. And when she did, her voice never wavered. Same tone, same rhythm. Every word measured like she was reciting something ancient in a language she barely remembered. Her mother clung to the idea that it was trauma. That Miriam was adjusting. That time would fix her. Her father watched the mirrors. Because they weren't right anymore. He started noticing them all reflecting her at the same time. Even when she wasn't in view. Even when she was upstairs, the downstairs bathroom mirror would show her, just barely. Shoulder, edge of hair, corner of a smile. And sometimes she wasn't alone. There'd be a second girl. Behind her, face hidden, breathing fog onto the inside of the glass. He tried to cover them. Took down every mirror in the house. Locked them in the garage. Broke the handheld ones. Blacked out the microwave screen. Even covered the TV with a towel. It didn't help, because it wasn't just mirrors anymore. Any reflection showed her wrong. Shiny doorknobs, window panes, water in the sink, always a beat off, always smiling just a little too much. Then one night, he found Miriam standing in the backyard, barefoot, covered in mud. He hadn't heard her leave. But there she was, staring up at the night sky, whispering to herself. He thought maybe she was sleepwalking, called her name. She turned around, smiled, and her mouth was full of teeth. Too many. Rows stacked like a shark's, sharp and gray and ancient. She blinked, and in that blink, her face flickered. Not changed, but shifted, like two versions of her were wrestling behind the skin. Her father collapsed. Heart attack. Died instantly. The death certificate says natural causes. Her mother insists it wasn't. Because Miriam didn't cry. Didn't scream. She stood next to the body and asked, "Can we feed it to her?" That's when her mother finally broke. Tried to run. Packed a bag. Took Miriam by the wrist. Drove 20 miles to her sister's house. But Miriam refused to go inside. Said the mirrors there were too loud. Said they wouldn't let her sleep. That she could hear them laughing when no one else could. That night, her aunt woke to find Miriam sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, staring into the silver toaster. Smiling. Humming. The next morning, all the mirrors in the house were cracked. But from the inside, shards pressed outward, like something wanted out. Social services got involved soon after. The caseworker stayed for 2 nights, then disappeared. Left behind only his badge, twisted into a shape no one could identify, and a note scrawled in the margins of his notebook. Her eyes aren't eyes. Miriam was placed into a facility. She never resisted. She walked in calmly, sat when told, ate what she was given, never lashed out, never screamed, never cried. But they couldn't keep mirrors from her. Couldn't cover every reflective surface. And when she passed them, the surfaces rippled, bent inward, and sometimes, just sometimes, reflected the wrong hallway. One nurse, curious and unwise, followed the reflection once, turned right instead of left, walked into a hallway that didn't exist. By the time they found her, her hair had turned white, and she was whispering a single phrase on repeat. She didn't come back alone. Miriam's records ended abruptly at age 15. Facility fire, no known cause, 17 dead. Miriam's body was never found. But 2 weeks later, in a town 50 miles away, a family reported a girl standing in front of their house at night, pale, red-haired, smiling too wide. She asked to come inside, said she was looking for mirrors. And in the next part, we'll follow a paranormal investigator who thought he could prove the Blackthorn curse was just folklore. He entered the last known location of the 13th mirror, with cameras, crew, and equipment, only to find that the real horror wasn't what the mirror showed, but what it refused to. They went in laughing, 4 of them, lights, gear, matching black hoodies with the logo of their low-budget web series stitched on the back, Phantom Chasers. The premise was simple: debunk local ghost legends with cheap tech and braver. Then, they should be attitudes. They'd been doing it for 2 years, chasing whispers in crumbling hospitals and fog-soaked cemeteries. Mostly staged, sometimes creepy, always played up for views. They never expected to find anything real, until they walked into the farmhouse outside Ashevale. The 13th mirror had been sighted there. Not found, not bought, sighted. A collector named Dennis Holcomb had recently gone missing. Known for hoarding rare occult items, he'd bragged online about acquiring a Blackthorn original. A mirror with a blood-etched brass frame and a reflection that whispers. The photos he posted were blurry, but unmistakable. The frame matched Silas Grinlow's designs, and the shape mirrored descriptions from the old Blackthorn estate inventories. Then the posts stopped. 2 weeks later, a neighbor reported Dennis's house abandoned, lights flickering every night at 3 a.m., despite no power to the property. So the Phantom Chasers went in. Max, the show's founder and frontman, thought it would be their breakthrough episode. They brought every tool they had: thermal cams, EMF meters, a drone for aerial shots, even a spirit box patched together from an old radio and scraps of static software. They wanted spectacle. They got silence, because the house was waiting. At first, it played dumb, just a rotting structure thick with mold and shadow. The furniture was overturned, books shredded, salt rings around every window. The only untouched object in the whole place was the mirror, still standing upright in the hallway, covered in a silk cloth stained yellow with age. Max pulled the cloth off, and the camera feed went black, not cut, not static. Black, like it had never been turned on, like the lens itself had closed. The live feed returned 10 seconds later, showing Max still standing there, staring at the glass, pale and stiff. The others didn't notice the gap until they reviewed the footage later. That's when they saw what the mirror showed. Not Max, not exactly. The reflection looked like him, yes, same stance, same hair. But there was something wrong about the eyes. Wider, too dark, like they swallowed light. And in the reflection's hand was something sharp, a shard of glass, lifted just out of frame. The others joked about it, called it creepy, laughed it off, but Max didn't laugh. He didn't say anything for the rest of the night, just stared into the mirror. They captured hours of footage. Lights flickering, objects shifting. Cold zones that danced just beyond reach. But the strangest parts weren't what they saw. It was what they didn't. Because whenever the camera turned to the mirror, the footage corrupted. Not just glitching, erasing itself. Every file timestamped while pointing at the mirror came back blank. No audio, no visual. Just pure soundless void. And yet, the runtime showed as normal, as if the camera had recorded something. They played one of the corrupted files anyway, just for kicks. The screen stayed black for exactly 7 minutes. Then, faintly, a shape emerged. Not a picture, a face, pressed against the inside of the lens, distorted, too close, like it was inside the camera, inside the screen, watching them through their own recording. A smile formed. Long, slow. Bone-pale teeth emerging from the black. Then 2 eyes blinked, one, then the other. They shut the laptop, laughed nervously, all except Max. He whispered something under his breath. One of the crew, Jamie, later said it didn't sound like English. Didn't sound like words. Just breathy syllables like coughing in reverse. They camped inside the house that night. That's where the final camera, set on a tripod facing the mirror, captured what came next. At exactly 3:11 a.m., Max stood up from his sleeping bag. Didn't stretch, didn't blink, just stood and walked toward the mirror. His reflection followed, but with a half-second delay. By the time he reached the glass, the delay had vanished. The two versions were in perfect sync, and then Max stepped into the mirror. The others didn't notice, not at first. But when Jamie woke up, the mirror was different. No longer reflective. Now it showed a hallway, long, twisting, lined with dozens of doors, all cracked open. Something moved just at the far end, a flicker, a twitch, maybe a foot. Then the mirror blinked. Jamie screamed. The group packed up in panic, rushed out, left Max behind. They told themselves they'd call someone, that they'd go back, that maybe Max had wandered off. But deep down they knew. They'd watched him vanish. The footage never aired. Every attempt to upload it failed. Hard drives wiped. Files glitched and replaced with videos of nothing but black screens. And behind the audio static, if you listened with headphones, you could hear breathing. Deep, wet, inhuman. 2 weeks later, Jamie disappeared. Just walked into a department store, went to the dressing room, and never came out. The only thing left behind was his phone, recording, showing the mirror in the dressing room, and the reflection of someone still standing there, wearing Jamie's clothes, but not his face. The Phantom Chasers series died that night. The remaining 2 members erased the channel, shut down all social media, and refused to speak publicly about what happened. But someone, somewhere, found a copy. A single backup file sent to a friend for safekeeping. It's been circulating in forums ever since. Deep threads, dark links, pass between thrill seekers and horror junkies. They say if you watch it alone, with all the lights off, and pause at the right frame, the mirror blinks at you. And if you stare too long, you see yourself blink back. And in the next part, we'll hear from a survivor of the original Blackthorn bloodline. A woman who tried to escape her family's legacy, only to find that mirrors remember blood better than names, and they never forget a face. They changed their name for a reason. Every generation of the Blackthorn family eventually tried to run from the whispers, from the history, from the gnawing weight of a surname soaked in horror. Some vanished outright. Others ended up in asylums, prisons, or pine boxes, their stories locked behind closed doors and hushed mouths. But one woman, Clara Bleth, born Clara Blackthorn, lived long enough to tell the story. She wasn't supposed to exist. The records said the original Clara Blackthorn died in infancy, taken by a sudden fever and buried in a stone crypt near the original estate. But that was a lie. The real Clara was hidden by a midwife with trembling hands and a conscience too loud to ignore. Because Clara hadn't cried when she was born. She hadn't breathed. Her skin was cold, her eyes wide open. And then, without warning, she blinked. The midwife, a woman named Agatha Crane, knew what that meant. She'd worked enough stillbirths to understand death when it stared her in the face. But this wasn't death. This was something else wearing its skin. She switched the babies, told Elias Blackthorn the truth she didn't survive. And she stole the real Clara away into the woods, raised her as her own. Clara grew up with questions. Why couldn't she go near mirrors? Why did her mother cover every reflective surface? Why did her skin tingle at the sound of bells? And why, when she stood too close to pawns or silver spoons, did her reflection move just a little too late? Agatha told her stories, but always wrapped in warnings. The mirror wasn't your friend, she said. The reflection isn't just you, it's who's watching you. Clara believed, at least until she turned 13, the age when the first generation of blackthorns were said to hear the call. That's when the dreams started. Always the same, a hallway of doors, each carved with the same swirling symbol. One Agatha had once drawn and burned, refusing to explain it. In the dream, Clara walked barefoot, the floors wet, every door creaking open as she passed. She'd see glimpses, a baby floating in air, a man sewing his own mouth shut, a woman scraping her reflection off a mirror like it was peeling paint. Then she'd reach the end of the hallway, where a mirror taller than a house waited, covered in frost, and someone behind it, always behind it, calling her name, but not saying it, remembering it. Clara hid the dreams. She tried to ignore the strange things, like how animals froze when they looked at her. How sometimes she'd catch her reflection still smiling after she'd frowned. But the truth had a way of clawing out. At 17, Agatha finally broke. She told her everything. That she was a blackthorn. That her real mother had vanished into a mirror. That Elias had used her blood, Clara's infant blood, to feed the 13th mirror. That she had been born in a room lined with glass mouths, and that something from the other side had watched her birth. That it had chosen her. Clara ran, first to the city, changed her name, dyed her hair, lived without mirrors, ate in diners where the cutlery was plastic and the walls were matte. But the thing about reflections, you can't escape them. Even your own eyes reflect. And that's where it found her. Not in some grand haunted house. Not through a cursed heirloom or a midnight ritual. Just in a train window. A flash of light, a blink out of sync. Then, a smile that didn't belong. After that, she kept moving. 8 states in 5 years. Motel rooms. Couch hopping. Never settling. Always watching her shadow. Until the day she met a man named Carter Mullen. Another runner, another survivor of a house that whispered. They didn't fall in love, not really. But they found something rarer, someone who understood. He'd lost his brother to the same mirror. Vanished in the middle of brushing his teeth, leaving only the toothbrush spinning in the sink. Together, they made a plan. Find the mirror. Trap it. Destroy it. They hunted old records. Property transfers. Auction photos. They traced fragments of brass frames, glass with etchings that matched the old sealess Grinlow designs. Every time they got close, something tried to stop them. Cars stalled, phones erased themselves, strangers followed them with eyes that didn't blink. And then they found it. In a farmhouse basement in Missouri, beneath a trapdoor sealed with rusted chains, and a cross carved upside down. The mirror wasn't hanging. It stood on the floor like it had grown from the dirt. The surface was smooth, too smooth, not dusty, not cracked. And Clara saw herself for the first time in years. Except it wasn't her. Not really. The woman in the glass was older, worn, smiling like someone who had waited a long, long time. She whispered, "You're home." Carter smashed the mirror, or tried to. His axe bounced off. The head shattered. Clara screamed, not because she was afraid, but because she felt something tear inside her. Like her bones remembered the glass. Like her blood wanted to go back. The mirror cracked. Not broken. Just a web of lines, like it was bleeding light. And behind that light, something moved. They fled. Burned the house. Clara doesn't know if it was enough. Carter died 3 months later. Throat slit. Police said it was a mugging, but she knew better. He had no wallet on him. No phone. Nothing reflective. His fingernails were torn, like he tried to claw his own eyes out. Clara went silent after that, moved to a cabin in Montana, lived alone. Wrote her story by hand, page after page, then sealed it in a metal box and buried it 10 feet deep. But she knew it wouldn't end there. Because sometimes when she blinks, she sees her again, the version of her in the mirror, smiling and whispering, "You're not the last." And in the next part, we'll meet the child born without a reflection, and how a town tried to hide him from the world. Because what's worse than a mirror that shows too much is a body that doesn't show up in one at all. They didn't name him at first. Not because they didn't want to, but because the nurses refused to touch him. When Samuel and Nadine Brooks delivered their son in the quiet town of Wren Hollow, the room should have filled with light. Instead, the bulbs flickered, the heart monitor froze, and the moment the child came into the world, every reflective surface in the maternity ward, from the surgical steel tray to the nurse's glasses, shattered. The glass didn't fall, didn't cut, didn't scatter. It dissolved, like frost boiling in reverse. Everyone went still, and the boy, wrapped in blood and silence, opened his eyes, and he had no reflection. Not in the mirror the doctor held up, not in the polished window of the nursery, not even in his mother's pupils, though she swore she could see something flickering where his outline should have been. Something that blinked too fast and too often. They named him Jacob, and tried their best to pretend. They left town soon after rumors started. After the nurses refused to come into their room. After one midwife claimed she saw a second Jacob watching from behind the medicine cabinet's mirror, mouthing words she couldn't hear but would later scribble onto her bathroom wall. He came through. Jacob was a quiet baby. Too quiet. He never cried. Not once. Didn't laugh either. Just stared. Always at mirrors. And not like a child staring at their own face. Like someone waiting for instructions. His parents adapted in strange ways. No mirrors in the house. No glass. Plastic utensils. Drawn curtains. They kept cameras, but photos came out wrong. Not blurry. Empty. In every picture, where Jacob should be, there was only background. The couch. The grass. A toy mid-fall. But never Jacob. It was like he'd been cut out. Then came the animals. Dogs refused to go near him. Cats hissed. Once, a neighbor's golden retriever lunged at him from across the street, breaking its leash, only to freeze mid-pounce. Legs stiff, jaw slack, eyes wide with terror, and collapse. Dead, no wounds, no reason. When Jacob turned 4, he started drawing. Shapes. Always black crayon. Always thick lines. Mostly mirrors, and what lived behind them. Figures without faces. Hands pressed against panes. He didn't talk while drawing. Didn't blink. Sometimes he'd draw eyes on every wall of his room, then peel them off the next morning without a word. His mother found one of his drawings under her pillow. It was of their house, drawn perfectly from above. And in every window, she was standing. Only she wasn't smiling, she was screaming. Jacob didn't speak much. But when he did, it was always questions. Why don't I show up? Why do shadows follow me but light doesn't? Where does my reflection live now? One morning, when he was 6, his father found him staring into the surface of the toilet water. Not moving, not making a sound, just watching it like it was a movie. When Samuel asked him what he was doing, Jacob said, "She's almost done growing." That night, Nadine woke up gasping. Dreamed something cold was inside her mouth. Not pressing, not choking, spreading. Like it was crawling from the back of her throat into her chest. She went to the mirror to splash her face. The glass was covered in condensation, but no reflection. She wiped it. Still nothing, but a word appeared in the fog, just one, "Mother." She screamed. Jacob was already awake, standing in the hallway, smiling, not like a boy, not like a son, like something else. After that, Nadine broke. She stopped eating, started covering her face with scarves, mirrors with newspaper. She whispered to herself in the kitchen, clawed at her own eyes when they landed on Jacob. Said he looked too much like the other one now. She wasn't wrong, because Jacob's reflection had returned. But it wasn't his, it was someone older. A man, gaunt, hollow-eyed, standing behind Jacob in every window, never moving, just there, waiting, and Jacob knew. He began to speak to the glass, not in English, not in anything human, just syllables that rolled like cracking ice. He spoke them calmly, lovingly, like prayers. Samuel tried to intervene, tried to reason with the boy, told him he was just a child, that none of this made sense. that he had to stop. Jacob blinked once and said, "But I was born remembering the other side." The next day, Samuel vanished, left for work, never came back. His car was found a week later, parked in front of a lake with no visible tracks in or out. Inside, the windows were fogged from the inside. Someone had written on them, "He belongs to the mirror now." The police searched the water. Nothing, no body, no sign, just Jacob's drawing, floating on the surface, soaked but legible. It showed a man being pulled into a mirror by hundreds of hands, and Jacob smiling. By age 8, he stopped aging, at least physically. Doctors said he was healthy, but the growth plates in his bones had slowed, nearly frozen. His eyes darkened slightly. His voice deepened. His skin grew cold. He still looked like Jacob, but not Jacob, because Jacob had never been there to begin with. What crossed through that day in the hospital wasn't a child. It was a placeholder, a seed, and it was blooming. By 9, mirrors didn't crack around him anymore. They opened, no longer just reflections, passages, and he began stepping through. His mother caught him once. Halfway through the mirror in the hallway, his torso gone, legs dangling, hands gripping the frame like a swimmer holding the edge of a pool. She screamed, pulled, tried to drag him back, and when she did, she pulled out nothing, no body, just black water. She screamed until she fainted. When she woke up, Jacob was sitting in her lap, dry, smiling, holding a shard of glass, and whispering her name over and over like a lullaby. Nadine was committed shortly after. They say she never spoke again. Just stared into a compact mirror someone forgot to confiscate, weeping, as if she'd seen her child, but not her son. Jacob disappeared a week later. No trace. But every now and then, in towns nowhere near Wren Hollow, a boy appears. He never casts a reflection. He never blinks. And he always asks for the same thing, "Can I see your mirror?" And in the next part, we return to the one person who claimed they killed the mirror and failed. A broken woman hiding in a chapel built underground. Who knows the truth? The mirror isn't haunted. It's hunting, and it's getting closer. They say her real name was Evelyn Wren, but in the dusty corners of forgotten church records and private asylum logs, she called herself something else, the last sister. No one knows where she was born or how she came to know the mirror's true name. The one not meant to be spoken aloud, the one carved backwards into old stone, altar corners, and scratched under floorboards in blood. But what they do know is this: she's the only person who ever tried to kill it. Not contain it. Not trap it. Not resist it. Kill it. And she almost did. Evelyn lived alone, far below ground, inside what remained of a collapsed chapel beneath the Blackthorn estate. Not on any map. Hidden behind a wall of roots and stone, reachable only through a tunnel that had to be crawled for 20 minutes on hands and knees, breathing in dirt and mildew, your shoulders scraping rock with every inch. She'd carved a room there, her sanctuary. No glass, no lights, just candles, salt lines, and a thick leather journal bound with teeth marks along the edge. The outside world forgot her. But the mirror didn't. Evelyn had seen it as a child. She wouldn't say how. Only that it didn't look like glass to her back then. It looked like skin, stretched thin and throbbing, something that breathed when no one was watching. She said her twin was taken through it. A twin who'd smiled too early and spoke backwards when she was only 3. A twin who looked exactly like Evelyn, but wasn't Evelyn. The night it happened, the mirror in their shared bedroom blinked. Not a reflection. The glass itself. And the other girl stepped out. Evelyn watched from under the bed, frozen, her real sister gone in a breath, replaced by something wearing her face. Their parents didn't notice. They hugged her, fed her, kissed her forehead goodnight. Only Evelyn knew, only Evelyn saw. From that moment, she lived for one thing: vengeance. She trained in silence, spent years in monastery ruins, traveled to the last places on earth where the mirror's symbols were still whispered. She learned languages no one spoke anymore. found people who should have been dead, met with a blind man in Siberia who once melted half a mirror using words etched into his skin, a girl in Morocco who tore her own eyes out after her twin reflection began bleeding from the mouth whenever she smiled. They taught Evelyn what the mirror hated. Not light, not breaking, but memory. The mirror fed on repetition, on loops, on lives that forgot themselves. But memory, real memory, painful, personal, anchored, burned it. Evelyn began writing everything: names, dates, smells, dreams, songs, itching them onto her arms, sewing phrases into her clothes, tattooing numbers into her scalp. Every memory she could preserve became a weapon. She returned to Blackthorn at 29, alone, armed with a relic stolen from a silent monastery in Belarus, a stone blade etched with 13 names, each one belonging to someone the mirror had taken. She found the last remaining mirror, the 13th, and waited. It came to her, not with fanfare, not with shadows or screams, just silence. The surface rippled, reflected her. Not wrong, not twisted, just Evelyn, as she might have been. The reflection spoke in her voice. "You're late." Evelyn didn't flinch. She pressed her fingers to the surface and whispered the oldest thing she knew. Her mother's scent in spring. The sting of her sister's nails when they fought. The warmth of her father's arms when he thought she was asleep. The mirror shuddered. Cracks spidered across the glass like veins. The reflection blinked, and Evelyn struck. The stone blade hit center. A scream erupted, not through the room, but inside her skull, like her brain was being folded into itself. Blood poured from her nose, her eyes, her ears. Her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. She stabbed again, and again. Each blow stole a piece of her. She could feel it, the mirror drinking her memories, tasting them, fighting back. But it bled. For the first time in its long, silent life, it bled. Thick, silver-black fluid poured from the frame. Smoke hissed from the edges. The room trembled. And then it cracked. Not shattered, just cracked. Enough. Evelyn collapsed. When she woke up, 3 of her fingers were gone. Her left eye was blind. But the mirror, it was silent. She dragged it into the earth, deep beneath the chapel, built a tomb of salt, ash, and forgotten prayers, sealed it in a coffin made of mirror shards melted together with her own blood. She buried it there and carved a warning above. EFTB and Kies, Ruyan. She stayed, kept vigil, not because she thought she'd won, but because she knew it wasn't dead, just resting. Every year, the candlelight grows dimmer, the silence heavier, the air thicker, and sometimes, just as she begins to fall asleep, she sees her sister again, peeking from the mirror shard she kept for memory. Not the sister she remembers, the one that replaced her, smiling and waiting. Because the mirror doesn't forget, it remembers who heard it. And in the next part, a boy hears his dead mother's voice, not from beyond, but from his bedroom mirror, whispering lullabies she never sang. Because the mirror has learned how to sound like love, and that's when it's most dangerous. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not until his mother came back. Daniel Reeves was 11 the night he heard her voice again. It had been 3 years since the accident, the one the police called unavoidable, the one where his mother's car was found upside down in a riverbank with the driver's side door caved in and the passenger seat empty. No body, no sign, just a voicemail on Daniel's father's phone, recorded 15 minutes after the crash. One word, muffled, half drowned, Daniel. Since then, things had been quiet. Quiet in that awful way grief makes a house feel bigger than it should, where every creak sounds like a memory and every silence feels like blame. His father buried himself in work. Daniel buried himself in books. Neither talked about the mirror in the hallway. They'd covered it with a sheet after she died. Something his father did without explanation, just one night after pouring half a bottle of whiskey and staring into it too long. Then, one night, the sheet fell. No wind. No draft. Daniel found it lying on the floor, the mirror fully exposed for the first time in years. At first, he didn't want to look. But something pulled at him. Not his feet, not his mind, his heart. And when he looked, she was there, not in some twisted, horror movie way. Not bloodied or pale or hollow-eyed. She looked exactly like she had the last morning she made him breakfast. Apron still on, hair messy from rushing to get him to school. Soft smile, kind eyes. And she spoke, not out loud, in his head, clear as if she were right next to him. "Hi, sweetheart." He dropped to his knees. He cried. She said all the things he'd wished she'd said at the funeral. That she loved him. That she never left. That she was still watching. That she was proud. Her voice didn't echo. It settled. Like warmth around his ribs. She told him to keep their talks a secret. Said his father wouldn't understand. That he'd just try to stop it. That he'd break the mirror. And Daniel believed her. Because what child doesn't want to believe their mother still loves them? It became a nightly thing. He'd go to the hallway when everyone was asleep, sit cross-legged, whisper to the mirror. She'd reply, not always with words, sometimes just music, a tune she used to hum, sometimes just warmth across the glass, like a kiss pressed to his forehead. But then she began asking questions. What was his favorite food now? Had he ever felt angry at Dad? Did he miss her enough to come through? That's when the warmth started to rot. Because the voice was still her voice. But something beneath it had changed. Like there was someone else speaking with her. Layered. A second set of vocal cords echoing beneath her kindness, stretching her vowels too long, twisting the ends of her sentences just enough to feel wrong. Daniel didn't tell anyone. Not until the voice told him about the box. "There's something in the attic, baby," she whispered one night, her voice soaked in honey. "It's mine. I left it for you. It's full of memories." He went. Found the old, dust-choked box tucked behind insulation. Opened it. Inside, photos of his mother as a child, a necklace he didn't recognize, and a diary. One she'd never shown them. The first page was a warning. "The mirror watches when I sleep. If I go missing, it's not an accident. It's an exchange." Daniel ran. He didn't go back to the mirror that night. Didn't go the next. And for a while the voice was silent. Until the night he heard crying. Not in the mirror. In the walls. Soft, wet sobs. Choked hiccups. The kind of cry a child makes when they're too tired to scream anymore. He followed it. All the way back to the hallway. And the mirror was fogged. A handprint on the inside. Small. Feminine. He turned to run. But the reflection didn't. It stayed. Smiling. Then it whispered with her voice again. But this time it didn't call him Daniel. It called him David, his uncle's name. A man who died before Daniel was born. And suddenly the illusion snapped. The smile too wide. The eyes too wet. The reflection that didn't match. He screamed. Woke his father. The mirror was smashed that night. His father didn't ask. Just hit it with a hammer until glass filled the hallway like salt in a wound. They slept in the same room that night. And yet, even in the dark, even with the mirror gone, Daniel heard her. From the slivers of glass beneath the floorboards, from the water in the toilet bowl, from the glossy black of his tablet screen. "Don't be afraid, baby," she whispered, her voice now a rasp under a smile. "I am your mother, just not from here. He doesn't sleep anymore, not alone, not without headphones. And he never looks into anything that might show his face, because sometimes, when he blinks, he sees her smile flash back. Not from his memory, but from inside his eyes. And in the next part, we'll step into the story of a mirror that doesn't need to be looked at, because now it looks at you. A mirror that's no longer confined to a frame, because it's already been invited into your home. And all it needs now is your name. It started with a phone call. No number, no name. Just static that hissed like a breath taken too close to your ear, followed by a soft voice that asked one thing, "Is this you?" Aaron Patel didn't answer. He hung up, rolled his eyes, and told himself it was just another scam, a pocket dial, maybe even a prank. He was 25, grounded in logic, and working late, night IT help desk shifts that left him more tired than afraid. Paranormal. Not in his world. Not since childhood. He hadn't believed in monsters since the age of 9. When his mother covered the mirror in his room with a sheet after he screamed for 2 hours straight, insisting someone inside it had whispered his name, she never spoke of that night again. Neither did he. Until now, the next evening, the call came again. Same static, same breath, same question. Is this you? He paused longer this time, confused. Then it said something new. I see you now. And the line went dead. That night, his laptop screen flickered, just once. Not a blue screen, not a crash. The screen turned into a mirror. Not metaphorically, literally. He watched his reflection stare back at him. Not through a camera, not through any webcam feed. His reflection, in real time, blinking, frowning, smirking, not matching, as if it were pretending. Aaron shut the laptop, unplugged it, turned his phone face down, told himself it was exhaustion, but then came the messages, scattered across every screen, on his watch, on his microwave, on the reflective glass of the office building as he passed it at night. Short, disjointed. Always the same, we see you. Sometimes it changed, stop hiding, you're already in. He tried to wipe his devices, reset them, called support, ran diagnostics. Nothing unusual. No malware. No signs of hacking. The tech said what no one else ever had the nerve to say. It's probably just a mirror glitch. Aaron's blood ran cold. He didn't tell them why that word cut so deep. He didn't mention the dream. The one where he's lying in bed, unable to move, while his reflection climbs out of his laptop screen and kneels beside him, whispering his own name over and over in a voice that bubbles like oil. Aaron. Aaron. I know where your memories live. He woke up gasping, the screen still off, no light in the room, except for the faint glimmer in the TV, where the standby light had grown brighter. White. Then blinking. He unplugged everything, bought blackout curtains, covered every surface with black cloth, even duct taped his phone screen and used voice to text for days. But it wasn't enough, because the mirror had already seen him, and what the mirror sees, it keeps. He began noticing something strange in conversations. People said things he hadn't shared. A coworker asked about his scar, one he hadn't had since he was 13. His landlord made a joke about the song he hummed in the shower, though Aaron always wore noise, canceling headphones. A stranger on the subway looked him in the eye and said, I liked the blue shirt better, despite Aaron never having worn one in public. They were echoing, repeating things he'd done, not in this world, but the other one, the reflection's world. Because the mirror wasn't just looking anymore. It was mirroring, creating him over there. A second Aaron. One who never blinked at the wrong time. One who smiled longer. Who remembered things Aaron had long since forgotten. The laughter of his dead grandmother, the first lie he told as a child. His mother's trembling hand, that night she covered the mirror and told him not to speak. And now the mirror version was closer. It stopped mimicking, started leading. Aaron began catching his reflection smiling first, turning his head before he moved, frowning while he laughed, and worse, talking, lips moving silently behind the glass, like it was practicing his speech, learning how to sound like him. Then, one night, he received an email from himself. No subject, no signature. Just a single sentence, you are the reflection now. That same night, every screen in his apartment powered on at once. Darkness, then him. Not through a camera feed, through a mirror. 100 mirrors, stitched together across his walls, his ceiling, his laptop, his phone, all showing him sitting on his couch from the outside. And in every reflection, he wasn't alone. Behind him, just over his shoulder, stood something almost human. Not quite. A version of him with pupils like cracked glass, skin that shimmered faintly with shifting words, as if 1,000 other Aarons were clawing their way to the surface. He tried to run. Out the door. Into the night. But every window he passed showed a different version of him. Some screaming, some laughing, some completely still, watching, waiting. He stopped in the middle of the road, panting, hands on his knees, and then he noticed. No one else was moving, not the cars, not the lights, not the stars. He turned slowly to the shop window beside him, in it himself, but not standing where he was. Standing inside the shop, smiling, holding up a sign in one hand, written in red, "We traded places." Aaron screamed. No sound came out, because the real world had frozen, and his reflection had walked on. Now, people see Aaron on the streets. He nods, smiles, even holds doors. But something's wrong. His face flickers sometimes in glass. He avoids water, never checks his phone in public. And if you catch his eyes too long in a mirror, you see your own reflection step back. Because Aaron's not in our world anymore, and the one wearing his skin is still watching. And in the next part, we'll follow a girl who keeps seeing people who don't exist. Reflections of strangers she's never met, who wave at her from glass, and then show up in real life, each time closer than the last. They never blinked. That was the first thing she noticed, the people in the reflections. Not her, not her parents, not her dog. Strangers. Always strangers. Not the kind you accidentally glimpse behind you at a crowded mall or on the sidewalk. These people never passed by. Never moved on. They stood completely still in the mirrored world behind her, locked in poses like mannequins. But their eyes were alive. They stood in windows, in rear view mirrors, in the glass panel of the microwave, even in the curve of her silver spoon at breakfast. Watching, and they never blinked. Her name was Natalie. 14, quiet, just moved to a new town. Her parents thought she was lonely, missing her old school, inventing stories the way she had when she was little. They said it was her imagination. That reflections are funny like that. That she should stop staring into them so much. But Natalie knew the truth. It wasn't just imagination if they waved back. The first one appeared in her bedroom mirror. A boy, maybe 15. Pale, with wet-looking hair and hollow cheeks, like he'd been underwater too long. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light. Then he lifted his hand and waved. Slowly, like someone remembering how. She spun around. No one there. Looked back. He was gone. The next night, it was someone new. A woman this time, standing in the window reflection behind her, though no one stood outside. Wearing a white dress stained at the hem. Barefoot. Smiling. Natalie blinked. The woman didn't. The sightings became nightly. Different figures each time. Never repeated. Never speaking. Sometimes they stood behind her. Sometimes beside her. Once, one knelt, inches from the bottom of the mirror, tilting its head like a bird listening for her breath. And every night they were closer. Her drawings changed. At first just stick figures. Then details, faces, shadows, bleeding glass, symbols she couldn't explain but felt the urge to draw, like someone whispering them into her hands while she slept. She kept a journal of their appearances, sketched their positions, wrote down the times. Then they started showing up in real life. It began at school. She caught sight of a girl she recognized in the hallway. Long red hair, torn sweater, bandage on her cheek. The same girl who'd stood behind the kitchen mirror 4 days earlier. Only now she was real. Walking, talking to no one. No one else seemed to notice her. Natalie followed. But when she turned the corner, the girl was gone. The next day, she saw the boy from the bedroom mirror, sitting on a bench near the library, wearing the same soaked clothes. Watching her, she told a teacher. They checked. The bench was empty. Natalie stopped sleeping. The figures followed her everywhere, no longer limited to reflections. Now they stood on street corners, on rooftops, in the back row of the school auditorium, always watching, always smiling, and no one else ever saw them. Then came the night she saw herself. Not her reflection, another version, standing inside the mirror, crying, mouth stitched shut, hands pounding against the glass from the inside. Natalie screamed. Her parents found her curled in the hallway, whispering, "It's me, it's me, it's me," over and over again. They called a therapist, talked about medication, said it was trauma from the move, from adolescence, from stress. Natalie nodded, smiled when told to, but she knew. Because 2 nights later, she saw her father in the reflection, and then in the living room. But he never blinked, never spoke. He made tea, sat in his favorite chair, but didn't move like her dad. Her real father was already asleep upstairs. She didn't tell anyone, because she didn't know who she could trust. The reflections were walking now, living lives parallel to hers, echoing her world in broken, crooked ways. They brushed past her on the sidewalk, sat across from her on the bus. One leaned into her during science class and whispered, "Soon, you'll be in here. And we'll be out there." She ran, left school, locked herself in the bathroom at the library, turned off all the lights, smashed the mirror. But even the shards reflected movement she didn't make. She kept one piece, carried it with her, watched it constantly, because the next person she saw in the mirror, her mother, dead, face split down the middle, body hanging in the kitchen. Natalie rushed home. Her mother was fine, cooking dinner. But now, Natalie didn't believe it. She watched every movement, tracked every blink, and when her mother turned her back, the window behind her showed her still facing Natalie, still smiling, still watching. Natalie fled that night, disappeared, left behind only a spiral-bound notebook and one long mirror in her bedroom, smashed across the center, but not destroyed, the top half still intact. And in that half, the bedroom looked empty, but in the reflection Natalie stood there, mouth sewn shut, begging, while dozens of strangers stood behind her and one by one began to step through. And in the next part, we follow a detective who's seen the mirror's trail, missing people, burnt houses, silent rooms, and discovers the secret no one dares say out loud. The mirror doesn't want you to look into it. It wants you to remember it looking into you. Detective Marcus Klein never chased fairy tales. 21 years on the force, 13 of those as a homicide investigator, had hardened him into a man who needed bodies, evidence, and blood that stained. He'd seen plenty. People who vanished because of debts, rage, jealousy, or just pure stupidity. But this was something else. The pattern shouldn't have existed, shouldn't have connected. And yet, he kept seeing the same detail buried deep in files that weren't supposed to speak to each other, the mirrors. It began with a missing persons case. A 17-year-old girl in Ashburn left her house one night and never returned. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Her phone left on the nightstand, still warm. The oddity: her bathroom mirror was shattered from the inside. The glass had sprayed out into the hallway. That alone might have passed as odd, but not alarming. Not until the second girl went missing. This time in Dandridge, 2 towns over. Same age. Same conditions. And again the mirror broken outward, as if something had climbed through. Marcus didn't believe in the supernatural, but patterns didn't lie. He dug deeper. Found another case 11 months earlier, same circumstances. Then 5 more. Some closed. Some declared runaways, but all had the same constant. A broken mirror, a parent who claimed their child had been acting strangely before they vanished, and at least one report of them talking to their reflection. And that was when Marcus found her name again. Clara Blackthorne. Not in the system, but scrawled in the margins of a 1973 incident report. Child in mirror said she was Clara. No further info. Officer reassigned. He looked her up. No birth record. No death certificate. Just a ghost woven through over a century of whisper, thin files, fires, drownings, heart attacks in people under 30, all tied to places where antique mirrors had been sold, found, or inherited. He started following the trail. The deeper he looked, the more he felt it watching back. Not metaphorically, not paranoia, physically. In his office, at home, in the reflection of the subway window at night, there was always a flicker, a second Marcus. not mimicking him, watching him. He tested it once, stared into the mirror for hours, refused to blink. His reflection blinked first, and then smiled. After that, things began to unravel. The case files on his desk rearranged themselves. His coffee reflected faces not in the room. His reflection began whispering, but not through his ears, through his thoughts. It would say things he didn't understand. You've already let it in. Or she never left the first time. Or, worst of all, we remember you remembering us. One morning he woke up with dried blood around his eyes. No injury, but his bathroom mirror had been cleaned, spotless, and someone had etched a symbol into the corner. One he'd seen only once before, buried in a photo from the original Blackthorn House crime scene in 1873. It meant return. Marcus reached out to a former profiler from the FBI, a woman who once studied cult behavior. She agreed to meet. They sat in a public diner, the kind with shiny menus and chrome napkin holders. He explained the case, the disappearances, the mirrors. She didn't blink once. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a shard of blackened mirror wrapped in cloth, and placed it on the table without a word. He stared. And in the reflection of that shard, there was no diner, no people, just a long hallway of closed doors, and his reflection walking toward the last one. She said, "The mirror doesn't want to be looked into. It wants you to notice it looking at you. It learns. Every second you give it attention, it takes more. It doesn't just copy. It remembers, even after you forget." That night, he found every mirror in his house already covered. He didn't do it, and his security footage showed no one entering. But at 3:11 a.m., the hallway camera caught something impossible. Marcus sleepwalking, removing each cover, then standing in front of the tall hallway mirror for 6 minutes unmoving, his lips twitching as if being spoken through. In the footage corrupted after that, in the final frame before it cut out, he saw it, his own face in the mirror, mouth open, and something stepping out of it. Marcus tried to quit the case. He tried to submit a report to Internal Affairs. But his files were gone, his desk empty. The building receptionist claimed he'd never worked there. When he went home, someone else lived in his apartment, an elderly couple who said they'd been there 20 years. His name was no longer on the lease. His ID no longer scanned. His face didn't match the driver's license he'd carried since he was 21. Because Marcus wasn't Marcus anymore. Not here, not entirely. He was fading, overwritten by the memory the mirror had of him. Each time he slept, he dreamt of reflections that walked freely, that stretched their skin like masks, that whispered names of people long dead. He stayed underground after that. No mirrors, no screens. Writing on walls in chalk and blood, drawing the same symbol again and again until his fingers blistered. He etched one final message into the floor before he vanished. I saw it blink, and it remembered me. Now, his face shows up in cases he never touched. He's spotted in mirrors in towns he's never visited, and every detective who's worked the Blackthorn pattern ends up the same way. Lost, reflected, replaced, and in the next part, we follow the child who was born during an eclipse, whose first cry cracked the mirror in the hospital, and whose twin was never found, though every photo of her birthday shows two shadows standing side by side. It should have been a celebration. The day Ivy Raines was born, the whole town of Bellwood gathered outside the hospital. There hadn't been an eclipse like that in nearly 200 years. A full blackout, total and perfect, turning daylight into a shivering dusk for exactly 7 minutes and 11 seconds. Ivy's mother, Meredith, had gone into labor just before the sky began to darken. Nurses wheeled her into the delivery room as the moon swallowed the sun and a hush fell over the world. Then came the scream. Not hers, not Ivy's. A scream from the mirror. A floor-length antique that had hung in the delivery room for decades. No one remembered who put it there. It had just always been there. A family donation, they said. Vintage. Unbreakable. Until it wasn't. The mirror shattered the moment Ivy entered the world. It cracked from the inside out. The glass didn't fall, it vanished. Dust, air, memory. Gone. And for a split second, every reflective surface in the hospital dimmed. Even the metal trays. Even the glass of the IV bags. The lights flickered. Ivy didn't cry, but everyone felt the cold. And then came the shadow. It appeared in the photo. The very first one. Meredith holding Ivy. Tired but smiling. A nurse standing beside her. Nothing unusual. Until the photo developed and showed a second child in Meredith's arms. Identical. Impossible. Because Meredith had only given birth to one. There was no twin. No extra heartbeat. No second umbilical cord. The doctor swore on it. And yet, the second figure in the photo was clear another infant. Mouth slightly open. Dark eyes staring straight at the camera. Everyone blamed a glitch. A double exposure. Something technical. But the next photo showed the same thing. And the next. Until someone noticed the shadow. Always present. Always beside Ivy. Not in mirrors. Not in glass. But on walls. Two shadows cast by one body. One light source. One child. But two shadows. The second never moved quite right. While Ivy waved her hand, the second delayed by a breath. When she turned her head, the shadow turned its head after her. It became part of the family joke. Ivy and her invisible twin. They laughed, took videos, but as Ivy grew older, the laughter stopped, because the second shadow didn't grow with her. It stayed small, toddler-sized, still standing, still watching. Still late to move, and Ivy noticed. She would stare into corners where no one stood, speak to people no one else could see. When asked, she simply said, "She's always been with me. She's waiting." Waiting for what? Her father once asked. To take turns, Ivy said. By the time she turned 5, every mirror in the house had been removed. Not by her parents, by Ivy herself. They'd wake up to find them shattered, face down, shards arranged in deliberate circles. Ivy would be found sitting in the middle of the glass, untouched, humming a tune no one had taught her. When asked why she broke them, Ivy would whisper, "Because she can come through if I'm not careful." The family tried to ignore it. But things only got worse. Neighbors said they saw 2 girls playing in the backyard, identical, same red dress, same ponytail. One always silent, always standing too still. And once, Mrs. Trenner from next door said she saw both girls run behind the tree in the front yard. Only one came out. Ivy was questioned. She shrugged. She's still hiding. That Halloween, Ivy refused to go out. Said she couldn't wear a costume, because then she won't know which one I am. And that scared her, because the more the shadow stayed, the more it started copying Ivy in real time. No more delays, same movements, same gestures, same speech. Only mirrored, like it was practicing. Her mother caught her one day in front of the oven door, watching her reflection whisper a sentence before Ivy said it aloud. Meredith screamed. The oven shattered. The kitchen lights burst, and Ivy stood there smiling. "She's almost ready," she said. Ready for what? To switch. Ivy began waking with bruises she couldn't explain. Hands too small for her own. Fingertip impressions on her neck, her wrists. Sometimes she'd be found in the hallway, rocking, whispering the same word over and over: trade, trade, trade. Her parents called specialists, therapists, priests. None of them stayed longer than a week. One psychologist turned and ran from the house in the middle of his second session. He claimed Ivy looked at him, and for a second, just a second, he saw her doubled, layered. 2 faces flickering in and out like broken film. Smiling at different times, mouthing different words. And behind her, in the reflection of the window, something crawled across the ceiling. That night, Ivy drew a picture. 1 stick figure, 1 shadow, and a mirror between them. On the back, she wrote in sharp, childish print, "It's her turn next birthday." They fled the house, moved states, burned her clothes, started over. New school, new home, no mirrors. It worked for a while, until the next eclipse, a partial one this time, only 3 minutes, and Ivy didn't come back from recess. The school panicked. Police searched everywhere. Eventually, they found her standing behind the school cafeteria's walk, in freezer, shivering, barefoot. She wouldn't speak, just held up a photo. No one knew where it came from, but it was old, dated 1873. A sepia photograph of two children standing side by side. Identical. One smiling, one with her eyes scratched out. Written in faded ink beneath the photo, one to live, one to wait. Ivy's mother cried for days, not just because of the photo, but because when they got it under a scanner, they discovered that behind the two girls stood a mirror, and in that mirror, a third girl, smiling. And in the next part, we follow a funeral director who's begun seeing the dead blink in their coffins. Not when he's looking at them, but only in the mirror on the embalming room wall, where they smile and open their eyes, as if death was only one side of the glass. In every line of work, there's a moment you stop noticing the strange. For Malcolm Graves, it came somewhere around his 9th year as a funeral director. After enough embalming, enough grieving families, enough nights alone in a room with bodies that no longer breathed, the silence stopped feeling sacred. It became routine, clinical, predictable. Until the mirror started watching. It wasn't there by choice. Malcolm had inherited the place from his father, and with it, the antique mirror bolted to the back wall of the embalming room. Heavy brass frame, clawed feet, glass warped from age. His father had warned him once, offhandedly, almost like a joke, not to stare into it after hours. Just a trick of the light, he said. Sometimes you see things you didn't put in the room. Malcolm didn't take it seriously. Not until he saw the first blink. It was a Tuesday. He remembered that clearly, because the woman on the table had died from something cruel. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, and her husband had insisted on a closed casket. Couldn't bear to see her like that. Malcolm worked gently, as always, eyes fixed on his instruments. But something kept catching the edge of his vision. Movement. Small, delicate, like a hand brushing hair from a face. He glanced up at the mirror, and there she was, sitting upright, smiling. Not in real life. The body was still. But in the mirror, she sat with her legs dangling off the table, head tilted, mouth slowly widening into a grin no corpse should wear. Then she blinked. One eye, then the other. Malcolm spun. Nothing, just the body, cold, unmoving. He turned back to the mirror. She was gone. He didn't sleep that night, told himself it was stress, fatigue, the mind playing games. But the next night it happened again. Different body, elderly man, peaceful death. In the mirror, movement. Only this time it was closer. The man hadn't just blinked. He was mouthing something, soundless words. Malcolm leaned in, squinting at the reflection. And though he couldn't hear it, he could read lips well enough. Let me back. He ripped the mirror off the wall that night, took it outside, left it leaning against the dumpster. By morning, it was back in place, bolted, as if it had never left. He asked his assistant, Angela, if she'd reinstalled it. She just gave him a puzzled look. What mirror? That's when he checked the security footage. Every camera angle of that room was clear, except the one facing the wall where the mirror hung. Static, for 8 hours straight. But only that wall. He started noticing more details. The bodies began shifting, not dramatically, just enough to be wrong. A hand that was resting across the chest now by the side. A mouth that had been shut slightly open. He chalked it up to muscle twitch. Settling, things every mortician sees. Until he glanced into the mirror during a routine job and saw two bodies on the table. One real, one mirrored. But the mirrored one was sitting upright, whispering into the ear of the real one, whose eyes slowly opened in perfect sync with the whisper. He started talking to himself, playing music during work, doing anything to drown out the feeling that someone was standing just behind him, breathing against the back of his neck. The real fear came when a grieving mother asked if she could see her daughter one last time. He opened the viewing room, let her in, She stared at the closed casket for a moment, then turned to him and said, "She's smiling in the mirror." Malcolm froze. The woman pointed across the room to a decorative vanity mirror, angled slightly toward the casket. In it, her daughter's reflection stood beside her coffin, arm outstretched, mouth wide and twitching like it couldn't quite finish a grin. He smashed that mirror too. But it didn't matter, because now the reflections were following him home. He started seeing them in puddles, in storefront glass, in the glint of polished shoes. Not his own reflection, other versions, faces of the dead, blinking, moving behind him. One night, he passed a parked car and glanced at the side mirror. His own face looked back, but the eyes weren't his. Too dark, too deep, too full of something else. And they whispered something, not into his ears, but straight into his bones. "You keep them too long. They want out." It was then he began checking his records. Some of the caskets were lighter than they should have been. He opened one. It was empty. No signs of tampering. No one else had keys. But the mirror showed something else. In the reflection, the casket still had a body. But it wasn't lying down. It was smiling, pressed against the glass, waiting. Malcolm stopped taking new clients. Started sleeping in the embalming room, watching the mirror, waiting for it to crack. But it never did, because it liked being watched. And one night, he finally saw himself in it. But his reflection had no eyes, only mirrors where they should be. Two small, polished circles of black glass, each showing tiny moving figures trapped behind them, blinking, crying, pounding at invisible walls. He realized then the mirror didn't reflect the dead. It kept them, and they were starting to escape. Now, no one's seen Malcolm in months. The funeral home is boarded up. But late at night, if you walk close enough to the back alley, you might catch a glimpse through the shattered window. One man, alone, still embalming, and in the mirror behind him, dozens of bodies standing, smiling, and blinking. And in the next part, we meet a blind girl who shouldn't be able to see at all, but who claims to know exactly what's inside the mirror, because it speaks to her and says she's the only one it trusts to carry its name. They said she was born without eyes, not blind, empty. Where there should have been pupils, irises, lids, there was only skin, seamless, smooth, as if her body had decided the eyes weren't necessary, or worse, that she would see without them. Her name was Leela, and from the moment she was born, she never cried, never flinched at light, never reached out blindly like other sightless children. She just listened, with too much stillness, and sometimes she'd smile when people entered the room before they made a sound. Her mother said it was a gift. Her father said it was wrong. But no one expected what came next, not even the mirror. Leela was 5 when she first whispered its name. Her mother had been brushing her hair in the small bathroom, the only one in the house with a mirror. A plain, rectangular thing above the sink, harmless, untouched, and always cleaned twice a week. Leela had never seen it. Couldn't. And yet, as the brush moved through her dark hair, she turned her head toward it, slowly, and said, "He's behind it." Her mother froze. "Who, baby?" "The one who remembers. He told me his name. I'm not supposed to say it yet. Not until he's ready." No one had ever told Leela about mirrors. Not their purpose, not what they did, not how they worked. And yet she described them, perfectly. Their edges, their glass, the way they ripple when someone steps close, and how you can't hear the screaming unless you already belong to it. Doctors came. Said she was imaginative. Said her brain was filling in the blanks. Said she was seeking stimulation in her own mind. But Leela didn't act like other imaginative children. She didn't draw monsters. She didn't cry at night. She didn't even talk to herself. She talked to the mirror, every day. Even after her mother covered it with a towel. Even after her father removed it altogether. She'd sit in front of the wall where it used to be and have full conversations with someone no one could hear. Sometimes she'd laugh. Other times, Her nose would bleed while she whispered, barely audible, nodding at invisible answers. When asked what she was doing, she'd say, "He's teaching me how to see." At 8 years old, Leela disappeared from her school for 27 minutes. No one saw her leave. No cameras caught her. She was there, and then she wasn't. And when she came back, she was holding a shard of mirror in her hand, wrapped in cloth, still bleeding. When questioned, she only said, "He let me touch the other side." The cloth was burned. Her parents never found where she got it, but that night, the walls of the house groaned like something ancient had rolled beneath the foundation. And in every reflective surface, windows, cups, TV screens, the reflection wasn't of the room anymore. It was of a hallway, a long one, with doors made of glass and something walking behind them. And Leela smiled as it changed, because now she could see, not with eyes, with memory. She said the mirror had shown her things, faces of people who had never existed in this world, but had in others. People who had been traded, rewritten, pulled through. She said the mirror didn't hate, it didn't lie. It watched, and she was its favorite. She called herself the holder. When asked what that meant, she said, "I keep the names it's swallowed, so they're not forgotten. That's why it speaks to me." Her mother begged her to stop, prayed, tried to exorcise the house, but mirrors don't care about prayers. They reflect what's already there, and what was inside Leela wasn't just her anymore. She began speaking in languages no one recognized, backwards, in riddles, sometimes speaking to people who weren't present, using names that didn't exist in any record. And at night, her voice wasn't hers. It deepened, fractured. She'd say things like, "I remember your first breath. You screamed when I blinked." The boy in the grave still whispers in the dark. Her father destroyed every reflective surface in the house, even water, even screens. But Leela didn't need mirrors anymore. Now, people were seeing her in theirs. A neighbor called the police after seeing Leela's face in his car window, smiling from the inside. A woman across town claimed Leela whispered to her from the lake as she bent to fetch water. "She's on the other side now," the woman said, before biting off her own tongue. By 10, Leela no longer needed to speak aloud. People near her would hear her words inside their own thoughts. Cold, damp, like breathing in grave dirt. She'd be sitting silently, and a person would fall to their knees, sobbing, covering their ears, screaming, "Make her stop, she's inside. Make her stop." And always afterward, a mirror nearby would crack, not from impact, from pressure, like something trying to push through. Leela vanished on her 11th birthday. No doors opened. No windows broke. She was just gone. In her place, her mother found a mirror, round, brass, framed, on the floor, still warm, and in its glass, not Leela, but something wearing her dress, smiling with teeth that didn't belong to a child. And in the next part, we follow a man who inherited a mirror sealed in lead for over 100 years, and the moment he peeled back the cover, he saw his own funeral, with guests who had all died decades before, standing in the crowd and waiting for him to notice them. The mirror came in a crate, heavy, dust-choked, nailed shut with iron, and marked in 3 languages: Latin, German, and something older. Symbols etched like teeth gnashing in a silent scream. The crate had been sealed for over 100 years, found buried beneath the floorboards of an abandoned church in Austria. No records. No name. Just a single line on a faded note taped to the lid: "Do not see yourself before it sees you." Andrew Wetley was a collector. Of the rare, the forbidden, the strange. He didn't believe in curses, only in provenance. And when a European auction house offered him the mirror, he paid for it before anyone else could touch it. It wasn't fear that held his hands steady as he pried the crate open. It was excitement. The mirror was wrapped in lead sheets, layer upon layer, as if the weight was meant to keep it down, not just safe. Inside, a full-length oval mirror, the kind you'd find in a Victorian foyer. Its frame was pitch black, scorched in some long-forgotten fire and warm to the touch, unnaturally so. The glass shimmered like smoke trapped between two surfaces. No reflection, just movement, not flickering, breathing. Andrew, of course, thought it was an optical illusion. He cleaned it, polished it, set it in the center of his sitting room, but it refused to show him, not a single reflection, until midnight. The chime of his antique clock struck 12, and the mirror suddenly bloomed to life. Not a ripple, not a fade in, just snap, one frame to the next like a blink. And the room in the glass wasn't the one Andrew stood in. It was a chapel, old, decaying, pews empty, candles flickering where none had been lit, and in the center a casket, closed. Andrew froze. The mirror was showing him something, a memory, a vision. No, something worse. It was his funeral. He knew it, not just from the shape of the casket, but from the photograph propped beside it. It was of him, smiling, a photo he didn't remember taking. Then the figures appeared, one by one, slowly filtering into the pews. Silent, expressionless, their eyes too wide, mouths too still. People he hadn't seen in years. His childhood neighbor, dead in a fire 20 years ago. His great-aunt, buried in 1983. A man who had taught him piano when he was 7, gone from a stroke. They were all dead, and yet they were attending his funeral. And they all looked at him. Not in the real room, but in the reflection. He staggered back. The image remained. Then it began to move. The camera zoomed, not literally, but through the mirror. Like someone on the other side was stepping forward, carrying your eyes with them. The angle glided toward the casket. Slow, almost reverent. Andrew tried to look away. He couldn't. He wasn't just watching the reflection anymore. He was inside it, smelling the incense, hearing the whisper of fabric on wood, feeling the still air like breath before a word is spoken. The mirror showed the casket open. Inside him, not peacefully laid out, but wide-eyed, mouth frozen in mid-scream, fingers bent backward, as if he'd tried to claw his way out. And standing above him, head tilted in mock sympathy, was a priest with no face, just a mirror for a head polished and full. And in its reflection, Andrew could see someone behind him, watching. From inside his own house, he spun around. Nothing. But when he looked back at the mirror, the casket was closed again, the crowd gone. Only the mirror-headed priest remained, closer now, reaching forward. Its glass fingers tapped once against the inside of the mirror, and a crack bloomed across the surface. Andrew covered it, threw a sheet over it, boarded up the sitting room. But it didn't matter. The mirror had already seen him. And now it showed him only one thing, no matter when he looked. No matter what light or angle or hour, it always showed the same chapel, same funeral. Only now, every time he passed by, there was one more person in the pews, alive. At first, people he knew from work, the cashier from the corner store, the girl who delivered his groceries, and then came the worst of it. He saw himself in the crowd, dozens of versions, some younger, some older, some in suits, some bloody, each of them watching the casket, waiting, and he knew then. This wasn't his death being foretold. It was being rehearsed, practiced, again and again, until it became real. Andrew stopped sleeping. He ripped out every mirror in his home, refused to touch screens. He never left the house, but each morning, the mirror in the boarded room had moved, just slightly, like it had leaned forward, as if trying to get a better look. Then came the night he saw the casket in his dreams, felt himself trapped in it, screaming with no voice, and above him the priest's mirror, face staring down. But this time he could see into it, and inside was his house, his room, his body sleeping, until it sat up. Now Andrew doesn't answer calls, doesn't respond to knocks. Neighbors report seeing his silhouette at night, pacing endlessly. Sometimes, they say, he stops in front of a window and freezes, mouth open, as if watching something no one else can see. And the reflection on the glass, it doesn't move with him. It just stands there, smiling, dressed for a funeral. And in the next part, We follow a woman whose job is to clean out old estate homes until she finds a closet with no door, only a mirror covering the frame, and when she leans in to clean the glass, someone on the other side breathes back. There was nothing unusual about the house at first glance. A 2-story colonial tucked into a forgotten edge of Vermont, with ivy, covered windows, and the smell of old wood clinging to every floorboard. Estate cleanouts weren't new to Clara Hemsley. She'd done them for over a decade. Dead owners, long-lost heirs, silent halls haunted only by dust and forgotten china. But this house, this one had something different, something waiting. It started in the upstairs hallway, a closet with no door, no knob, no hinges. Just a mirror, floor to ceiling, flush against the wall where a door should have been. It was seamless. Cleaner than the rest of the house, untouched by the webs and grime clinging to every other surface. Clara paused, puzzled. She checked her floor plan. The closet existed on paper, labeled storage 4th X sift. But the only thing there now was the mirror. She tapped on it. Solid, glass. Not a trick panel or sliding frame. She leaned closer, squinting at her reflection. And that's when she saw it. The breath, not hers. A soft fog of condensation blooming across the inside of the mirror. Not from her nose. Not from her mouth. From behind the glass. She blinked and stepped back, heart skipping. Her own breath didn't fog the surface. It remained cold, dry. But the ghostly vapor behind the mirror faded just like exhalation on a cold window, and then came again, this time with a pulse like a sigh. Deep, steady, living. Clara whispered, "Hello." The breath stopped. The mirror stayed blank. But then a sound echoed through the hallway, soft, rhythmic, like fingers brushing the other side. Tap, 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 tap. She backed away. She'd cleaned out houses with rats, squatters, even feral cats once. But this was different. This wasn't something trying to escape. It was something waiting for permission. She left it alone that first day, marked it in her notes, wrote it off as some strange architectural choice, maybe a one-way mirror, some weird 70s design. But she dreamed about it that night. In her hotel, miles away, she saw herself walking into the mirror, not reflected, but through, like it was water. And on the other side was the house again, but emptier. Every room mirrored, but wrong. The chairs faced backward. The windows opened to darkness, and in the closet with the mirror, her reflection waited, smiling. She woke up screaming. Clara returned the next morning. Drawn, like gravity had shifted. The mirror hadn't changed, but the hallway was colder. Not in temperature, in memory. Like something was peeling itself closer to the surface. She stood before the mirror again, closer this time. Whispered, "Who's there?" The mirror shuddered. Not a quake, not a tremble, a ripple, like breath under skin. And for a heartbeat the glass turned black, not blank, bottomless. Then it cleared again, showing her reflection. Only this time, her mirror self wasn't still. It breathed, not in sync, delayed, like it was learning her. And its mouth moved before hers did, forming words she hadn't spoken yet. "Let me in." Clara staggered back, tripped, crawled into the hallway. Her flashlight flickered. Every other mirror in the house, small ones in picture frames, silver trays, even the lenses of glasses left behind, turned. She saw herself, not from her angle, but from the mirrors, looking up at herself from impossible perspectives. Dozens of them, watching, waiting. She ran. Didn't finish the job. Filed her invoice with a note, "Mirror closet sealed. Recommend removal." But she couldn't stop thinking about it. And weeks later, when no one had answered her calls, when the estate company stopped returning her emails, she drove back. The house was still empty, but the front door was open, and the mirror in the hallway, cracked, not shattered, just one long line from top to bottom. Like something had pushed once, just hard enough. Clara stepped closer. Her reflection was wrong again, standing straighter, older, smiling with a sadness she didn't feel. And when she lifted her hand to touch the crack, a hand on the other side reached up first, pressed its palm against hers, skin to glass, only it was cold, dead, and the breath fogged up again, this time with a message traced into the mist. "We needed your name." She pulled away. But her handprint remained on the inside, and when she looked again, her reflection was gone. In its place, a hallway, empty, with a mirror at the end, and something crawling toward it. Clara turned, ran, made it to her car, drove without stopping, but every reflective surface on the road showed the same thing: she wasn't alone. Her reflection sat in the passenger seat, smiling, not moving, just waiting. She doesn't sleep now, because when she does, she dreams of rooms that aren't hers, closets with no doors, and mirrors that pulse like hearts. And in the next part, we follow a boy who can't speak, but draws the same image over and over: a man without a face, standing in a field of mirrors, and when his drawings are pieced together, they form a map that leads to a place no one remembers building, buried beneath a forgotten town. He hadn't spoken a word since birth. Not a cry, not a gasp, not even the breathy vowel sounds most infants blurt without meaning to. His name was Elias, and silence wasn't just his condition, it was his identity. His parents, desperate and kind, filled the void with speech therapy, sign language, touch-based communication. But none of it mattered. Elias didn't need to talk, he drew. From the moment he could grip a pencil, Elias filled pages. Fast, relentless, like his hands weren't drawing for him but for something else. At first, it was dismissed as typical childhood obsession. Trees, figures, stars, fields. But soon the patterns emerged. The same shape repeated over and over again: a man. Always alone. Always in the center. Always without a face. And behind him, mirrors, dozens. Hundreds, some shattered, some fogged, some cracked with spider-web vines of glass. Each one facing a different direction. And yet, no matter how the angle bent, the man's reflection never appeared. Just emptiness. A void where he should have been. Elias never explained the drawings. He couldn't, but he'd hum while sketching. A tune no one could place. Low, hypnotic, repetitive. One day, his teacher gathered all his drawings over the course of a semester and spread them out on the floor of the art room. There were over 80 sheets. At first glance, they looked like chaotic scribbles, but when arranged correctly, side by side, top to bottom, they formed something terrifyingly deliberate. A map, lines connected through borders. Trees lined up to form a trail. Shadows pointed like arrows. And in the center of it all was a clearing, an enormous circle of scorched earth, surrounded by standing mirrors, 40 of them, each carved with symbols too exact, too ancient for a child to invent. No one knew where the clearing was. But Elias did. He pointed, not at the map, at the window, and signed one word: home. His parents, skeptical and terrified, agreed to follow his guidance. They drove for hours. Elias sat silently in the back seat, clutching a drawing he refused to let go of. He tapped the glass twice when they passed through the town of Graybridge, a place so small it didn't exist on modern maps. One road, a diner, a shuttered post office. Trees grown too thick for the sidewalks to matter. Here, he signed. So they followed the path through the woods. Elias knew every step. He walked ahead, never hesitating, though he'd never been there before. They reached the clearing just after sunset. The light poured through the trees in gold, then blood orange, then the deep blue of pre-night. And in the clearing, it was there, just like the drawings. 40 mirrors, some buried up to their frames in the ground, some leaning at crooked angles, all silent, all untouched by time. The air smelled like burnt paper. The wind didn't move. Elias walked into the center. He placed his drawing on the ground, and he smiled. That was the first and last expression of joy he'd ever shown. Then he looked at his parents, raised one finger, and pointed to a mirror near the northern edge. There, reflected in the glass, was a house. Not behind them. Not nearby. Not anywhere real. It was a tall, narrow Victorian structure with black shutters and windows that wept dark stains like tears. Elias signed again, I lived there. His parents exchanged looks, confusion, fear. I don't understand, his mother said. Elias stepped toward the mirror and stopped, because something inside it moved. Not his reflection, not his shadow, but a hand. Fingers long and gray, pressing against the inside of the glass, trying to match his palm. And then the man appeared. No face, just smooth skin where features should have been. But Elias smiled again, and mouthed a word. His father watched his son's lips form something, slow, deliberate. Brother. The man in the mirror turned slightly, revealing dozens of smaller figures behind him. Children, all silent, all watching, eyes covered with cloth. And every mirror in the clearing rippled, as if reacting to Elias' presence. The wind howled. Leaves flew upward instead of falling. And Elias dropped his drawing into the dirt, stepped backward, and signed again, I hear them now. Then he turned to run. His parents chased him, but the trees had changed. Twisted. Each path back curved inward. They spun in circles for hours, never able to escape the clearing. And when they returned, Elias was gone. No sign. Only the drawing. And in the mirror where the faceless man had stood, Elias now stood in his place, expressionless. Motionless. As if waiting to be seen. The police found nothing. No prints, no sign of struggle. But the drawings, they still reappeared. Every week. On the family doorstep, in their mailbox, under their pillow. Each one showing Elias standing in a field of mirrors. And the man without a face now had eyes. And in the next part, we follow a woman who survived a fire that claimed her whole building. But her burns only appeared on one side of her body, the side facing the mirror when the fire began. And she swears that during the flames, she saw herself step out of the glass and walk away unharmed. The fire started at exactly 3:11 a.m., or so the emergency report said. But for Alina Morris, it felt like something else entirely. A moment frozen between two realities. A split second where the world cracked and a shadow stepped through. Alina was one of the lucky ones who escaped the blaze that consumed her apartment building. She was pulled from the rubble, unconscious, with severe burns on her left side, the side that faced the giant mirror hanging in her bedroom. Doctors marveled at the odd pattern. While one half of her body was blistered and charred, the other remained untouched, as if protected by an invisible barrier. Her family called it a miracle. Alana called it a curse. The nights after the fire were worse than the pain. As she lay in the hospital bed, drifting in and out of fevered dreams, she saw herself. Not the woman burned and bandaged, but another Alina, standing tall, unscarred, hair flowing, eyes bright. She stepped out of the mirror behind the bed, walking silently away from the flames that consumed the room. The other Alina looked back once, smiled, then vanished. The hospital staff dismissed it as hallucinations from painkillers and smoke inhalation, but Elena knew better. Because soon, she began to notice signs that she wasn't whole. Her reflection, visible only in small fragments, cracked windows, warped spoons, was incomplete. Missing limbs, a dark smudge where her left arm should have been, and sometimes, when she looked in the mirror, she caught glimpses of that other self behind her reflection, smiling wider, breathing deeper, unburdened. One evening, alone in her rehab apartment, Elena heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, measured. She called out. No answer. Her breathing quickened. The mirror across the room fogged. Slowly, a hand pressed against the inside of the glass, fingers tracing her outline. Her heart slammed as the figure stepped into view. It was her. Unburned. Whole. Eyes glinting with something cold. The figure smiled, opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, the air thickened, and the room grew colder. Alina backed away. The figure lifted a finger, pressed it to its own lips. Shh. Since then, she's felt a presence, not inside her, but beside her, in every mirror, in every shiny surface, watching, waiting. Sometimes she feels a breath on her neck, soft as smoke, cold as the mirror glass. Her doctors say the burns will heal, but Elena knows something deeper is wounded, because one night, as she stared into a shard of broken glass on her bedside table. The other Alina reached through the reflection and touched her cheek. The coldness spread like ice, and Alina whispered, terrified, "You're not me." The figure smiled, "Not yet." And in the next part, we'll explore a man who claims his reflection saved his life by stepping out of the mirror to fight a shadow that tried to pull him in. But the victory came at a price he's only now beginning to understand.